Huzzah! People are making their way in. Fantastic. Oh, well, there's Doobie. Thank you, Doobie, for showing up. Oh, and also Leader. Hello, hi. Thanks for being around.
Hi. And hopefully my internet's like going to be, functional.
Fuck, he's back.
On the hotspot anyway. 10 out of 10.
Okay. Sure. Well, thank you all for joining. 1 second. I just gotta type something out. Someone say something.
Hello.
Check.
Say things.
Okay.
Well,
come on.
check.
Well,
Doobie.
Jason and Mr. Pan. So what did you guys think about the panel? Like, what did you guys think about, who'd you guys agree with? More importantly, did any of you disagree with me? So I can yell at you.
To be honest, I could only catch the end of the drug war part. What was your take earlier?
I just said drugs should be decriminalized and or even legalized. I'd be for legalization, to be honest with you. I think everybody agreed with decriminalization to a point, and then Connor had this crazy ass idea about the U.S. buying all the drugs from the cartels. This is really dumb. But my idea is just that they should be legalized, and I mean like all drugs.
So yeah, I agree. I think they should be legalized as well. I mean, decriminalization helps, but legalization, if you want to stop all the crime around drugs, you really need to legalize it, because the only way, to stop the crime around the drugs and stuff is to, allow people to go to the police if someone steals their drugs.
Remove the black market, right? That's the name of the game. Remove the black market, remove the competition from underneath, put it into the mainstream, feed it out. Unfortunately, not to what I like, because I am not a corporatist, but, I mean, if the government wants to distribute drugs to people who want it, I'm good with that too. If we could work that out, I'm fine with no profit, but absolutely legalization, absolutely, leave people alone. If anything, provide them all the possible education they could need to make an educated decision about it, and call it a day, man. Like, the rest is between them and their doctor.
To be very clear, like if you do choose to do drugs, I think you're probably a degenerate, and you're probably a gross person. But I think people should have the right to be degenerates and gross people.
Yeah. Well, decriminalization. I feel the same way too. It's your choice if you want to do it. If you want to stick something in you, you have the right to do it without anybody telling you not to.
I don't think that absolves you from any criminal liability if you do something messed up while you're on drugs, though. Like if you don't get to claim insanity because you took 10 hits of acid and decided to, run your car into 3 people or something. And not saying that happens, but just for example, I don't think you get to absolve yourself of any criminal liability. You still did it. You took the drugs. You were irresponsible when you took the drugs, and then you were irresponsible in the action you took after that.
Yeah, I mean, it would work the same way that it does with alcohol. Right? You don't relieve yourself of liability because you're drunk.
Yep.
In fact, I think that they're often like harsher sentences if you do something like that while you're drunk.
Right, because it's
I agree.
Total lack of responsibility. And I think that's where the law lies. Where's the personal responsibility? At what point are you going to harm somebody else or do harm to somebody else's property or, something like that? But if you want to do something to yourself, it's not. That's between you and yourself and whoever you pray to or don't pray to or whatever else, man. That had nothing to do with me.
Okay, so I think that most of you are stoners, so I don't think we're going to get anywhere with the drug thing. But what about what the actual topic was, which is police alternatives? What do you guys think about that? Like either whether it's like a what are they called, interventionists or interveners or whatever, interrupters, who just go around, they patrol the neighborhood, and they try to identify situations that might escalate to violence, and then they interrupt and try to calm everybody down and de-escalate. Or there's like what was the other one? Having mental health professionals go along with the police and shit like that. Like, what do you guys think about those ideas, to alternatives to policing, traditional policing?
I've always favored the idea that police should go to crimes. Okay. When you're talking about mental health issues, when you're talking about issues oftentimes of domestic disputes, I think that especially because of the rate at which police tend to get hurt around domestic dispute situations, it's better to interject people who are crisis counselors, people who can have the ability to talk people down, people who can rationalize, people who won't necessarily alarm somebody with a badge and a gun right off. Certainly, I think they need some escort at some point. Certain situations are going to call for that. Certain situations are more contentious than others. But I think the primary focus, especially where it comes to cases of domestic situations or situations of mental health issues, we need to tread very lightly. Also, traffic stops are totally unwarranted and unneeded now. There's so many other ways that we could deal with that. You've got cars that have cameras on it. If somebody's speeding, a police car can take a picture of the car and send a photo radar ticket right from the car. There's no reason to pull people over outside of an immediate risk to somebody, like if they're veering off the road and going to kill somebody, or something extreme, but other than that, let's let the police do the job of working for real crimes. As
what about
opposed to
speeding?
other shit.
Do you think speeding is a real crime?
Well, I
You
think
said you would handle it with photos and stuff, which makes sense. We have
No, it
speed
doesn't.
detectors. Why not?
Well, because
here. Go ahead, Doobie, if you want. But
well,
I have
okay.
a
So
theory we can
someone
throw out.
speeding is what's what I'm looking for is an immediate a risk to the people driving around them, right? So saying I'll just let's take pictures of it and get them later is kind of silly.
Well,
it really
you
depends
could
on
say
how much
criminal
you're speeding
versus 3 miles over, okay, or something like that. I mean, you could make the argument for putting into what would be considered reckless driving. If there's a point at which you're reckless driving and putting others' lives in danger, sure, action needs to be taken. But if you're talking about, California roll at a stop sign or, something like that, I don't know, that it seems a little trivial to pull somebody over for a broken blinker, something like that. You can take a picture of that and send a ticket in the mail. I don't see any reason you can do it.
Jason, one of the things you have to
and before you
realize.
one second,
I'm sorry,
you will go right
Yeah.
next. Thank you, Hans of Harkir, for the raid, for the 25-person raid. Really appreciate everyone. Check out Hans of Harkir. Who's been so kind to the channel. Thanks for the raid. And yeah, so if you came in, I should have a Peace Corps raid too, but if you've come in and you're appreciating what we're doing here, hit that follow button, make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live. I do it 6 nights a week. But thank you, Hans, for being so kind for that. All right. Excuse me. Thank you for being here. This is a new person. Damnation, right?
Yep, Damnation 3. I'm actually from the politics Discord. I'm pretty active on there, and this is the first time I've hopped on your Twitch stream, and I watch it religiously. I watch it when with the whole Destiny thing. I watched it from the first time Doobie was popped in here. So I was this one section about the drug conversation. I was watching the whole thing. I was like, oh man, I wish I could have hopped on during the actual reverie and watched it and had a whole conversation about that. But Jason, when you were bringing up the concept of sending people pictures after the fact, right? This is actually something that was done from other people to other people who didn't want to get tickets. One of the things that has been done before is where they would put on their license plate what's called an SQL injection code, right? So when the camera would snap the picture, it would read the license plate and then inject into the database a code that would then wipe that out, so they were no longer able to send an actual ticket to that person.
That is badass.
Yeah, that's
no,
great.
it was absolutely nuts to do that. And when this happened, you
Wait,
actually,
what did you say that was called? I might need that.
It's called an SQL injection.
They're running a little SQL code into the database is what they're doing, and it's corrupting the database, pulling their information up.
Exactly, yeah. And if you are aware of that, I'm pretty sure they patched that now because this was a publicly available article that this got out. But it was a demonstration of the lengths that people will go through to break the law and then not suffer consequences from it. So in that particular situation, human beings are intelligent creatures that like to sidestep the law like that. I still think you need a human element in the traffic stop portion of it because of that. Because you could create all of these amazing, grandiose systems that stop people from actually trying to do this, but we're smart. We like to subvert systems like that and
Yeah,
figure it
but
out.
if you're talking about a speeding ticket versus somebody getting a speeding ticket and then getting dragged out of their car in the middle of the highway and getting their head stomped because they happen to be the wrong color in the wrong part of town, I mean, I'd take giving them chancing giving them the speeding ticket by photo.
That's stupid. I'm sorry.
I mean, why do you have to equate like people getting a speeding ticket to like,
Because
obviously
that's
the
happened.
circumstances? Why
That's
irrelevant.
reality. You know.
I mean, you get into a car, you're liable for an accident. Should you just never get into a car?
What I'm saying
saying
is
that
I don't
we should
think
allow people to be
traffic
speeding and just
stops
send
have
them
proven to be deadly to both police officers and to citizens equally. They're not. It's not safe typically, and that's why I said you
what would not
reserve
safe
that
be
for the
driving?
What is
the.
not what's not safe is to have like people speeding on the road and to allow that to go on unimpeded, or people with, like broken traffic, broken signals and stuff. That's literally asking to create accidents. This isn't something you can just send them to. You can send something to them. You need them to stop and to try. And
For a broken blinker, you can't just send them a ticket. What are they going to do on the side of the road? Are they going to go change the light bulb on the side of the road?
They can go to an AutoZone and get it fixed right then and there.
And what happens if they get like three? But what happens if they get like 3 tickets because they pass like 3 cops and they're like, oh, that car doesn't have a ticket.
Well, it doesn't mean you can't keep track of them and decide at some point, hey, we have 8 officers on the road or whatever. It's not like you can't keep track of them and see what's happening. Like
the unfortunate part with that, right, is without an actual human that is processing the traffic stop, they don't hold the same legal weight as somebody who, like a cop, actually pulls them over. Like that's how it works with speeding tickets. And when you're talking about expanding that out, right, I believe there's a few Supreme Court cases that have handled this, at least in the state that I live in, which is Iowa. That it says that these are more considered along the lines of like parking tickets, right, where they put a boot on your car. Which, if you're talking about a system like that, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but they don't hold the same weight as like moving violations when it comes to traffic stops. Like you get to stop that person if they are speeding, and then you get to set them on a court date, and then they have to come to court and then like defend themselves from that. And like sending them a picture doesn't necessarily track onto that.
we had voter radar in Arizona for a long time, and believe me, they get you. They will either mail the ticket to you, and if you decide not to show up, they will serve you, and they will try several times, and you will pay for that service. I've seen it.
If you're missing a blinker, though, essentially, if you're not stopped on the road, it can take several days. I don't know, maybe a week before that ticket gets you, and during that time, you're still on the road with that blinker that you may or may not have noticed, and you can catch multiple tickets for that because you're still on the road and you still haven't been. It's better to have people stopped. To have people stopped, tell them that their blinker or like their car is non-functional, send them home. Really?
Because hell, they might not even be aware of it. Like they might just not be aware that their blinker broke or something like that.
I mean, if you're really worried about like the violence that happens at traffic stops, I feel like there's other ways that we can reduce that. Yeah, because it does seem to be a logistical problem if we get rid of road cops. Now that other members of the panel say so, we can just do stuff like mandatory body cams and stuff like that might help to curb the presence.
Way better way to operate that is talk about mandatory body cams, because there's actually like a way that you can, because one of the problems I've heard with like mandatory body cams is like the cops not turning them on. I'm like, why are we allowing cops to manage this at all? We've got 5G and cell phones. The minute they go on call, turn the camera on, record it, boom, and then it gets uploaded to the like a central server, and the station has it.
Yeah, I think it's really
not even the
silly.
station should have it. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I should go to like an independent third party.
Yeah,
right? Some community organization that manages this and oversees it. Yeah, I think it is really weird to have the cops in control of that at all.
Yeah.
It seems like a recipe for disaster, and it has been a recipe for disaster. I mean, there's been plenty of cases where you end up in a he said she said, because the cop turned their camera on a minute later, forgot to do it, or whatever the fuck, right?
Put that
Quote
in
unquote,
quotation
forgot
marks.
to do it. Yeah.
I mean, we should maybe even go so far as to say that your arrest is no longer valid. Like at least for anything other than like murder or assault.
I'm actually on board with that. That's a great idea, actually. Is if it's found out that your body cam has been turned off for any reason, we don't have like a visual record of it, and we err on the side of, well, we can't definitively prove that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. We're just going to let you go, because that's how the American legal system always works, right?
I can
Is that we
find
assume-
total consensus with that. I 100% agree with that. Absolutely.
Based.
I think it's interesting when you talk about like this radar example, right? When you talk about like speeding tickets, like honestly, like I prefer like just having like the cops being in the bushes and like having the radar and then basically scanning people and then just sending out a ticket. I think that's it's unbiased. You don't have to send the ticket, or you don't have to stop the person. You don't have to do this whole ordeal when whether this person is black or this person is white or whatever, so I generally when it comes to speeding, it kind of makes sense. Maybe with like with more like complicated like things like broken lights. I'm not quite sure about that, but definitely with like speeding, this makes sense, right? So like this shouldn't be like a discussion overall. So yeah.
It's about the immediate impact of it, right? Like when someone's speeding, there's usually like a reason why. Like when it's like excessive, we're talking like an excess of like 10, 15 miles an hour, or like 10 or 15 kilometers per hour over the speed limit, right? Yeah.
Oh, but yeah. So if you talk about like excessive speeding, like if the person is like pointing the laser and then they see like this person is like going extremely fast, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that at that point this person like this police person wants to like be like, whoa, this is like so extreme. I'm gonna pursue this person, right? But when it comes to like more like moderate like things over the speed limit, like you can say like, yeah, you can make a limit and then go above that, like whatever you want to talk about. But
the problem is sometimes like the limit's just a little too low, and people speed safely when there's no traffic, and so they do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But like they should not get a ticket for that. Like we should just raise speed limits for specific times, perhaps, or like if there's a certain density of car, like we have the technology to change the speed limit signs with like little LED lights, or just use common sense, and then we can actually charge people who are going like 200 miles an hour. We can charge them because they're endangering people.
Yeah.
And then the only reason there would be for cops on the road is for like dangerous driving, like swerving in and out of lanes and stuff.
Right, and that was my point too. Is like there is a certain level of speed where it's like too fast, that's reckless.
Okay. No, hold on. What my friend Pisco would say if he was here, as a soon-to-be lawyer, is that like all you're doing is kind of moving the problem down, like a few notches. Like even you guys are saying there is a limit, right? And then beyond that limit, the state should take action. Okay. Well, right now we have that. We already have that. I guess you could set it higher, but like 200 miles per hour. That's too much. Oh, sure.
I don't know miles. I'm Canadian. I'm sorry.
Whatever.
I
doesn't
like
matter.
that's really it's like an airplane, right?
It doesn't matter. But like
you don't do miles.
No, they kilometers.
They're
but
kilometers.
Like, yeah.
Do you want me to explain the kilometers to miles? It's like basically
you can just literally use
1.3. Like
no, it's
the point is it's very fast.
Thank you very much.
You're right, Prime. You're right.
Okay. So 200, yes, that's extremely excessive. But why not 100 too? I mean, 100 is extremely fast. Most speed limits here, like most highways, are 55, which I think is way too low. 55 and 65, right? So if they're 100, that seems.
I will answer that. Okay, the reason that they are too slow for you right now is because the reason that they're too slow for you right now is because they set the limits before cars were better and roads were better. So it should be a little higher, but not 200. I was definitely being hyperbolic. No,
they weren't. They didn't. No, the speed limits here were set during a gas crisis, and they wanted people to like conserve gas. So that happened, like I think, in the Carter administration.
Yep.
There was
so,
a
like,
different. there was actually a different law you were breaking called waste of finite resources. Was the actual law before speeding, and that was what you were talking about. I believe the Carter administration.
And they set the national speed limit at like 55 miles per hour because they had some sort of data that like identified that was like the most efficient route to like minimize gas mileage or something like that. And then the next step of that was it was like in the 90s or the early 2000s when they removed that law and allowed it for states. There's actually a state in the United States, I believe it's like Montana or something like that just doesn't have a speed limit at all on the interstates.
U.S. Autobahn, the United States Autobahn, yep.
I will say, I feel like this is generally not that
do-
important when it comes to criminal justice reform. Like speed limits can be annoying. Sure, they're a little bit too low, but I don't think that's a major problem that we really need to be putting all our effort into fixing.
No, I disagree.
No one's saying
No.
Well, I mean,
I
it's a
disagree.
start.
Hold on. No, let me finish. I disagree in that speed limits themselves, sure, but the whole speeding or moving violations are an easy way, right? Like lawyers will tell you that's the easiest way for a cop to get their hands on you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a moving violation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
it's
and
like
so and when they do, hold on, let me finish. So yeah, when that happens, right? They can search.
Guys,
your
I gotta mute
property,
myself because
right?
I want to
In
jump
your car, there's all kinds of
over
things
this
that
shit,
happen on
dude.
the
Like
car.
this is money for
They
me.
can
I think
detain
cops
you.
have
They can do
no
all
business
kinds of
pulling people
like
over.
a series.
I
of,
do not think
powers open
so,
up
guys.
when they
Like
use,
no, unless
for
they're
moving
driving into a
violations.
freaking
and
house.
It's just like one of the easiest contacts that most people have with law enforcement. So it actually is something that we should have put a lot of effort into.
Yeah.
And like really think about. So like talking about speeding, should we raise the speed limit? But like if you're saying that it sounds like what you guys are saying, well, it's a soft limit, right? If someone's speeding, they're speeding for a reason. Okay, well then they can speed a little bit over that limit, but then that limit, that new number becomes the effective limit, and then why not speed a little bit more over that? At some point,
And
like
it keeps
if you're
going
gonna
up,
have
yeah.
a limit, if you're gonna have a limit, there needs to be a hard limit. Unless you're saying
the
that we
reason
should have
is
no
safety
limits.
of the road.
I think that the police using discretion for speeding is probably the best way to do it because the only
Is it?
like sometimes going 7
want
miles
that?
over is going. Yeah, it is. I'll admit it is very easy for me to say because I'm white. But I will say that the idea of discretion in general, that if I'm going 7 miles an hour, that could be really dangerous in one context, and if I'm going 15 miles an hour, that could be pretty safe in another context. So just having a flat limit might not be the best way to do things.
Isn't that
sort of discretion.
bullshit?
Now I
That's
am
some
aware with the
freaking bullshit.
discrepancies by race, especially. I think there's this big study about how the discrepancies go away at night when they can't see the color of the skin. So it is easy for me to say, but in principle, we do want discretion in enforcement of speed laws, I think.
And it also depends. Like you don't want to be driving on I don't know what divisions of miles you guys drive on, but like say 35, or so you don't want to be driving on a 35 mile an hour road and it's snowy and you're just like, oh, I'm allowed to drive 35 miles an hour. Like there should be discretion. So like on a what is it, 55 your highways 55 on a
More
55
like
highway
75
it depends
It's
on the
like,
state.
it's like 55
Okay,
up to like
so
70.
whatever. Say on your
and a lot of
highway,
places,
a straightaway.
There's a couple places 85, but mostly 75.
Whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. Say just like whatever number. If it's a straightaway and there's no one there, why not go a couple miles faster? It's the only reason would be that maybe all your speed limits should be faster and you should get 6-gear cars instead of 5-gear cars. Twist ending there.
Wouldn't it depend on the amount of speed that you use on the lane? Like, say if I'm on a 55 and I start going like 75, like, wouldn't that matter? Because I could possibly.
There's no one around. If there's no one around and there's nothing to bump into, you can just go straight.
I mean, yeah, that's fine. But like, if it's a fucking like busy highway, come on.
Yeah, you missed the part where I said if there's no one around, like if it's a sparsely populated highway, like you can go a little faster, and the slow people just stay on the right lane and you can just do it. Like they do it in Germany, and
which is
just way less car
basically
crashes.
which is basically what happens on the interstate in the U.S. right now, regardless of speed limits. That's literally like
No, the difference is that
Yeah.
you guys fucking pay for it.
Let's go to DB.
I just wanted to advance a controversial idea. This is a really boring fucking topic nobody cares about speed limits. So why
was getting at
don't
earlier.
we maybe talk about the gentrification thing? I think that was a way more interesting conversation, and I'm actually curious as to like what some of you think about it.
So, so here's the thing. Our friend Joe, the Silly Serious, wants to come on and talk about policing, not specifically speeding tickets, but policing in general, policing alternatives. So that's going to happen soon. She's going to get here soon. So we'll stall for time until she gets here. And I'd love to hear what she has to say. I designed that question for her, but unfortunately, life got in the way. Stalling. Just one more thing on the speeding thing. It's like moving violations, like the purpose of those were to were for safety reasons, like literally for safety. It's because people didn't know like how to drive cars. When you first had cars, people had no idea, right? So when you were driving on the wrong side of the road, I don't know, that's the thing that might not happen, right? Or if you were not like following like the turn signals, right? Then that was a thing. At some point, that's a new thing for society, and society has to navigate like how to use turn signals. Or not turn signals. I mean traffic lights, right? All those things, like that was something that people just literally didn't know, didn't have enough information on, and so it's supposed to be a helpful thing. Hey, this isn't the rules of the road, the rules of this thing that's brand new to us. This isn't it. But then they used it later on. It became a vector to attack people's fucking civil rights. Frankly, they could. That was the easiest path because of court cases, of a series of court cases that officers could use to search, and then that combined with the drug war, right? Because you have to do this because drug kingpins or whatever the fuck, I don't know, are using our highways to transport these illegal substances, and that's very important. So we gotta stop that, right? And so, but like it doesn't like usually get to be used against those people, right? Like how many times do police actually stop a person and find bars, like not bars of cocaine? Bars? I don't know. Bags of cocaine. Oh, no, sorry. I don't do cocaine.
Bricks. It would be
bricks,
bags.
Bricks. That's bricks. Sorry, bricks. Yeah, bricks of cocaine.
Kilos.
Yeah. Right.
Bricks
Yeah.
or kilos, man. Just
Kilos.
bricks.
Look. Okay, you guys have a problem. Got it. All right. So how many times that actually happen? It doesn't actually happen often. Instead, those laws that were designed to be used against like the worst offenders are instead used against us as civilians, right? As an excuse to violate our privacy, to get into our cars, to hassle us, to harass us, and then to arrest us, right? It's I know it maybe sounds a bit boring, speeding ticket laws, right? But that actually is important. This is every day, and this is one of the easiest ways that you have contact with law enforcement. And the more oftentimes you have contact with law enforcement, more oftentimes you can be arrested or face violence or fucking die, right? Like anytime there's an armed response, like all those things are on the table. So it's actually an extremely important issue. Anyway, I managed to stall long enough for my great friend, Joe the Solicitor, to come on. Hey, Joe, I love you so much. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Thank you for stealing.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So, Joe, we were talking about that prompt I had, like I was saying, was designed for you. And it was about looking for...
I have... Can you... Wait, actually... That's okay. I'll call back.
Okay. If you have to go, it's fine. All right.
No, it's okay.
All right. We were talking about policing alternatives that the left actually has available. All right. So I presented one thing. It was more of an addition to policing, right? But it just doesn't have evidence of working. So that was the violence interrupters. Like there isn't any solid evidence, according to this article, and it made a pretty convincing case that this is a thing that works. So it got me thinking, like, what do leftists have that has a track record, has studies showing that's working, or in lieu of that, is it a problem that leftists don't have that, because what we're asking for is a complete revolution of the system, and so you shouldn't expect us to have those things. Is that a fair for leftists to say? Well, I don't have those things because what I'm asking for has never been tried before, and so we just kind of have to move in that direction, like incrementally or something.
I think part of the problem as well is that people tend to talk very generally about this issue, but ultimately solving policing as an issue requires very specific solutions. Different areas have different crime problems, have different health problems, have different interactions between the police and the community, have different histories of interaction between the police and the communities. So you're not going to get a study that has significantly universal results, because the reality in which policing exists is different in each sort of community. And something, I'm just going to call someone out from Reverie. I don't remember who it was exactly. I think it might have been Captain A. Jones. I'm sorry, mate, but you got to get called out. Nothing annoys me more than someone saying ACAB and then leaving it at that. And not because it makes us sound, the whole reason when you say, oh, the left don't have any actual arguments and the left don't have any policies, is because of people like that. Like, that actually damages our position, because if you don't explain what you mean when you say all cops are bad, if you don't explain, and I don't even think it means it anymore, because it's been trashed by so many people like that who just say it as some sort of like weird identity
Sloganeering
claim
is
to
such
being on the
dog shit,
left.
man.
I think
don't like
actually
sloganeering.
you need to be saying it's not about cops being bad people.
Will always
it's
make
about
any
the
cause
history
you
of the
have
institution
seem
of policing,
and
meaning
unimportant
it is impossible, no matter how good of a
radical and
person you
fringe.
are, given
And
the
that's the
job you're
problem with that
expected to
shit.
do,
You have to be
given
very
the
careful
understandings that are trained
with how you
into
put any
policing,
kind of
it is
thing like that
impossible for you
together
to be a good
to
cop.
lobby or
And we need to
market people
radically
into
rethink the system,
your frame
and that
of
means
thought and
changing our
into your
matrix of
ideas.
understanding.
And
So this
there's
idea
rhetoric
that
behind that
abolition
just sounds
or
horrible. Like, it's
rethinking policing
bad.
is about
Because
blowing
I
up
don't think
policing and
anybody
starting some sort of anarchist
thinks
state
that all
is just
cops are
incorrect
bad.
and goes
I think
against all
that the
abolitionist
institution
aims.
of policing
Abolitionists
is
are
flawed
looking
because
to
we've let it get away
put
from us.
in reforms slowly, but reforms with a very significant goal, which lives very far away from policing. So it's not, and you have to have a goal, because otherwise you end up with dystopian things like mandatory minimums, where you're trying to do the right thing and you fuck it up majorly by putting something in. So yeah, you know what? I think that gang thing's super interesting, because it's community based. Gangs are a specific problem, and having people that they trust, when we know police don't trust, when we know gangs don't trust the police, I think there's something interesting worth investigating there. Maybe you get negative results, maybe you won't get good results, but you got to try it to get results. Anyway, there you go.
Okay, so the reason people say ACAB is because it took you like 5 minutes to say what we mean by what we say.
Holy
ACAB.
shit, yeah, it takes time to explain things. I don't want to have a 2-second conversation about changing an entire
in like
institution.
Twitch chat, people being like ACAB, it's like, yeah, I'm with you on exactly what you just said. You know,
Not always though, because he was on a panel and he could have talked about it. He had the opportunity, he had a platform to explain it, and instead he was like, you know what, ACAB, fuck that, I'm not going to explain it. And that's shit for all of us.
Wait, who was that?
Captain,
this is Captain A. Jones.
Sorry, Captain. I'm not meaning to.
He was on a panel with.
But you're welcome to come back.
What, tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, like, everyone in this panel tonight knew what ACAB means. Come on.
No, they don't. Because
leave it at that.
Every time I'm on a panel, someone's like, oh, it's just like people want to blow it up and they want revolution, and they don't present anything meaningful. So people don't know what ACAB means.
It's important to express what the idea for the solution is going to be, or what your grievance is, as well as saying that. And if you're not going to address that and you're just going to throw that out there, absolutely. Sloganeering is horrible. I'm sorry. Sloganeering is just bad practice because it doesn't really tell the whole story. And the first thing that happens is anybody that's even the slightest bit in opposition to it, even if they might kind of go your way, as soon as you throw in some of those really, really heated slogans, they're like, screw this, I'm out. I want nothing to do with it. You may have pulled somebody in, but because of the sloganeering,
that sort of thing makes me
them.
look more into it. That sort of thing makes me look more into it. And see
I'm
what
not trying to you, but it just turns most people off, right? Like, most of the time when someone goes ACAB, they just say, fuck you, you're a radical, I'm not going to listen to anything you say. Like,
and if I hear someone be like, I love that, I think, cool, you've got like super empty politics and you just like getting in on a chant. You don't really care about reforming policing at all.
Yeah, and I mean there are even slogans that are like less divisive, like police to police and stuff like that. Like they're not perfect. Obviously, any discussion of criminal justice, requires a lot more
We've been
nuance.
saying
But
police to the police for decades, and nothing ever happened. Like
Because so much was happening with
it's
ACAB.
useful. I mean, it's a little better. Like
I don't
at
think it
least
is.
So
one
the
cop-
idea is
Oh,
that
boy,
we
oh, boy.
ramp up
a couple
Oh, no,
cops
so,
that
okay,
are
look,
balanced,
hold on,
you
hold
know,
on,
'cause there
everyone
are
shut
good
up. Everyone,
police officers.
everyone, hold on. When I'm talking, don't talk over me. Don't do it. I don't like it. Stop it right now. Don't do it. Thanks. Great. Like, I don't want to do another discussion for ACAB. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. I do not care. So we're not
Poor
going to do
Brian.
it. I swear to God, I'll end this stream right the fuck now. I don't want to do it again. Thank you. All right. So, but there's all kinds of things to talk about in terms of police alternatives. I don't have to talk about the fucking slogan. I don't give a shit about the slogan. Yes. What are those alternatives, Joe?
There's a really cool program in Denver, and I think it's being trialed in some other places, which are street outreach workers. And these are people who act as like a bridge between the police and the community. And their job isn't necessarily they're not social workers necessarily. Their job isn't to do any sort of policing. Their job is to create really strong relationships with the community, and sort of work out problems that really like traffic, right? So there could be like a traffic unit, but street outreach workers specifically, they look at things like homelessness, mental health crises, interactions within relationships, like people who are in domestic violence situations. They don't intervene, but they keep knowledge about sort of gang issues. So they're really like a bridging sort of service where there's a lot more trust, because there's an immediate distrust between a lot of communities and the police, particularly people of color, queer people, women. All of these people don't have the same access to help from the police that other people do, because in an emergency for them, they may not call the police. So these street outreach workers form trusting relationships with community members, and they work out and try to assess when police do need to be called in, and when things can be resolved using other methods such as health services or counseling, etc.
Does that taste good?
Sounds like an expanded version of violence interrupters, right?
Well, I mean, that's what I was trying to say. Violence interrupters to me is interesting, because if I lived in a state where gangs were a super big deal, then maybe I would want a violence interrupter. Maybe having knowledge of that, having a trusted person in the community, maybe that would work. But I don't think you can say, awesome, we tested that, put violence interrupters in every city. I don't think that we should legislate like that or create policy like that.
Okay, I see. Oh, so hold on, Pan, I see your hand up. So what you're saying is that that crime is so localized, right? And the reasons for it are so localized that creating national policy. This is something, violence interrupted is something Biden mentioned and talked about. And it's like, but you're saying you wouldn't even want it on a federal level, or well, it's most of these programs
I think keeping policing as local as possible is the best solution. I definitely think decriminalizing, rolling back policies that exist can be done at a federal level. But when it comes to instituting new solutions to crime and violence in the community, that has to be done at a local level.
I can't say I disagree with her on that. As long as there's some federal oversight to make sure that they aren't
Australia
crossing.
Has a different history, right? But in the U.S., you're certainly
civil
aware,
rights boundaries, things like that. I think I could.
The federal government
be
has
on board
had to
with
continuously intervene,
kind of,
on the local level, because the local cops can't be trusted, right? Literally, I think a few weeks ago, the Justice Department announced another investigation on another department. Because of a history of, well, the usual that we all know, right? So in that case, Doobie, I see your hand up as well. So we'll go to Pan. Oh, he's gone. So like when I hear like leave it up to a local level, I hear, well, we have a white power infrastructure that'll handle this, and they're going to decide, like on the local level. They're the ones with the power.
This isn't something though that you craft. Like, you don't go to the police and say, off you go, guys. Like, it's something that you would craft as a community. You would assess, like, the same way that you create any sort of policies. Like, this is what I mean when I say that leftists and revolution has a different goal to reform, in that reform would be saying, okay, police, you need to do this different. What are your suggestions? And their suggestions will always come back with something that gets them more money and more material and more authority, right?
So-
And so leftist reform should look at disseminating away from the police and away from that kind of power. Now, there are lots of things I'm not in favor of. I don't like community policing. I don't like turning my neighbor into a snitch. Like, I'm not in favor of that. But if you talk to your community, if you engage researchers, if you actually work to the crime that exists there, you can come up with alternatives. There are, like, in different states, just as you said, there are states where the police do terrible jobs. I gave you Denver as an example where a pilot program's really working well.
Yeah,
Wait,
hold on.
Denver is not your country, is it?
Hold on.
And Denver's
No,
one of
no.
the most major population cities in the
yeah.
United
It's pretty close to us.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Denver.
Pretty
Yeah,
close to
Denver's
where I'm at.
Denver's us. Yeah, Denver,
Yeah.
Colorado. Okay, no problem. She's foreign. It's okay. So we'll go pan and chinchilla then. All right. But that's not what I was thinking of. What you described, right? What you described is actually more of a liberal way of doing things. This is Obama's way of doing things. When he formed a blue, not what you were saying, but like when you were talking about going to the police and asking them, that's what Obama did, right? Obama, like, he formed like a blue ribbon panel, right, to get the bottom of this. And what was that made of? Police fucking chiefs, right?
Yeah.
Police chiefs were asked, what are the police doing wrong, right?
She
And
said
there
that was the bad option.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, but she said it was a revolutionary take. I'm saying that's not. I'm saying that's a liberal take.
But
whatever.
revolutionary isn't going to the police. Revolutionary is doing the exact opposite. So reform works within the existing matrix. It works with our current understanding of policing. So yeah, if you were a liberal, you would go to the police, you would go to existing legislators. But a revolutionary take is changing the matrix of what we understand police's purpose to do. I am not someone who believes that we could exist without the police, right? I think that anyone who's been in a moment where they've been in extreme fear and think that they're going to face violence, call 911. That's what they do. Emergency, right? Well, 000 here. But like, I don't think I think you need some police, but I think asking the police how to reform themselves is completely wrong.
Exactly. Agreed. Okay. But that's not what I was talking about when I talked about like needing like the federal government to be involved, right? When I was like, I wasn't moving in that direction. So what I was trying to describe is like a community, like as you said, looking at this situation and designing policy. However, I know that these. I guess what I'm about to run into is like, the utopia versus the reality of the situation. So that understanding that with the history that we have, these communities are very fragmented, and that this power isn't distributed evenly. And so that if we were to design something like this, it seems like there would be certain stakeholders who would have a much bigger say in this. And that the solution that the community would arrive at might not be equitable. That's why I'm saying that with the that's why we have to have the federal government intervene all the time, because so many communities don't.
Because those same problems don't exist with the federal government. There's not the same power of inequality across the federal government.
Hey, I agree. I'm just saying that the history is that to solve the brutal policing violence, right? We've had the federal government to come in, because those localities were perfectly fine with the brutalization that those police were doing, right? And they took the federal. Yeah,
but that's not to do with you're fighting something that I'm not arguing for. You're fighting the federal government needing to step in because the existing police are brutalizing and the community is doing nothing about it. I'm saying let communities, and crazy, right? You're not running into a problem of utopia. You're running into a problem of trying to come up with policy for an amorphous nothing example. When I told you it needs to be specific community to community. So you're always going to run into problems when you're trying to visualize this. Now you're sitting on a Twitch panel, you thought about it for a couple of hours, and you already have highlighted that this may be a problem, that certain people have more power than others. So we can assume that well-meaning people will also think of this before setting up such a panel, and therefore they will account for that in what voices they elevate. This is what happens when we see alternatives to policing being introduced by communities. They don't go, let's get some white benevolent technocrats together and sit them around a table and see how violence in a part of the community they never goes to affects them and their solutions. No, people get community members.
Okay, all right. Let's go to Pan.
I think the
we're going to Pan, Chinchilla, and we can go to Regi after.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of along the same line, bringing back a sort of beat policing system, which sounds horrible. The name sounds horrible, but what it means is just that police, if they're going to do proactive policing, it must be in their designated like block so that they get to know the community, so that they hopefully come from the community, but basically making it so that the cops are part of this community, and if they are out there patrolling, they're patrolling the same area so that the community around there gets to know them, that they get to know the community and stuff like that, so that a lot of the so that a lot of these services, so that we get rid of that attachment where there's a cop who's never been to this part of town before. We have cops that specialize in this part of town and know the community and ideally care about the community and are a part of it themselves. I think that supporting stuff like that,
he's actually hitting some things that I think
it's
are
definitely
just
more liberal
actually
than the
pretty
revolutionary
right on.
stuff you guys were talking about, but I think it's shown some
At
promise
least for
before,
like
especially given
where
the
he's at, because he's actually
ineffectiveness of
kind of
typical
part of the right.
proactive
So
policing.
And
I'm not even mad at the position he's taking because that's pretty
do you want to
liberal for
respond
him.
specifically to that, Joe?
Say I agree.
Yeah,
The only thing I would do is add that separation. So with the street outreach workers, they don't have that. They have the authority of the state and the authority of their relationships with the community, but they don't have that punitive like arm of the law where they can arrest someone on the spot and throw them in jail and ruin their lives. Like taking away that malicious history of the punitive and punishing and damaging nature of the police. I think creating that bridge in between is really important.
Yes. So one thing, just before we move too far away from it, so I just want to make sure I'm nailing your position down. So you're acknowledging that a community can create their scheme, right? And maybe it's a more equitable scheme that you're talking about, but you would leave room for outside intervention into that scheme, like that maybe they arrive at a unequitable choice. That maybe would have the power.
Nope.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I believe in federal. I believe in a federal system, so I understand that a government, like the federal government, can step in on state choices if they're against human rights. I don't know. This is what I mean. It's difficult to talk about this kind of action in this weird abstract way because you're asking me, is it okay for the state to step in? I have no idea what they're stepping in on, so I can't tell you.
Okay, hold on. We can. It's not like it's like this is hard to imagine, right? It's
well, then give me an imagining.
Okay,
because
great.
this is my whole point. Like you need
to sure. Racial discrimination, right? So we come up with some sort of alternative policing scheme, and then we have racial discrimination happening, right? Or discrimination based on some sort of other ethnic lines, right? And something needs to happen, right? So you would say that in that situation, that the federal government, should step in and deal with whatever that alternative is, right?
Okay, and we know that the racial discrimination is happening as a result of the community program.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
sure.
and is it a malicious claim? Is it white people claiming that they're now being discriminated against for some peculiar, like, you know what I mean? Like it's so it's actual racial discrimination.
I mean, I understand what you're saying in that like these things are very complicated. Yeah, but I just want to get a
of course. I mean, if that happened, sure. But I kind of don't like that example either because like if the whole point of these kind of community programs is to work, like I told you, I'm really critical of the Camden model. I don't like community policing. I don't like turning your neighborhood into a bunch of cops so that you're constantly on edge about the people around you reporting you. Like there are some community models I disagree with, and I think are ineffective. I don't think that necessarily the federal government is going to, the federal government should step in every time something isn't 100% effective. But yes, if there are great human rights abuses occurring as a result,
I let him know what you did, and so he's here to defend himself. But we'll get to him later.
Occurring as a result of a program, then yeah.
No, please continue.
So okay, all right. So then I just want to make sure because you got interrupted there. Then we are in agreement. This is all I want to do is establish this one principle. That's all I'm trying to do, right? And that we understand that.
But this is
For
why you
instance- for
hate
instance,
me. This is why
no-
we fight all the time. I don't have one principle. I really work from an intersectional framework where it really depends on the exact situation that I am looking at. Everything, my analysis completely matters on the situation that I am looking at.
Here we go.
Yeah, I would agree. Hold on, stop, please. If you're new here,
I'll stop in a second and then he'll leave. He just likes to fight me.
When I am dealing with Joe, I get in a mode, right? Joe, I think this is very simple, right?
That's your problem. You think it's very
No,
simple, and it's extremely complicated.
It's not my no. Thank you. I love her so much.
You said it.
Joe, I walked into that. Fair enough. But I get that all these problems are nuanced, right? And I don't want the federal government stepping in every situation, right? You gave an interesting example saying that what if it's a malicious report, and actually like, well, white people, we're being discriminated against, right? It's in a way to protect them and their discrimination against minorities, right? So white people are saying we're the ones we're suffering reverse racism, but that's just masking what we're actually doing to the community, right? The community is trying to fight back, right? That could be a situation that happens. In fact, we do see it happening here in the U.S. right now. Great, 100%, right? We can understand that these different situations call for different responses. Great, we live in a complex, dynamic world. We've established that, but all I'm saying is that you agree that there are some situations that you can imagine, even in this world that you're trying to build, that you would need an outside force, right? Maybe not, and maybe you don't think it's a federal government. Maybe you think it's something else, right? But that an outside force would have to step in because the community may not be able to find that, get to that. We were just talking about gentrification here, right? And part of gentrification, when you have these not outsiders, but these new residents coming in, right, is that they treat the former residents with disdain, right? That article that I had, that I shared, it talked about like Black individuals, right, who have been there for a long time, like trying to interact with their new white neighbors and then being treated as outsiders.
Yep, I was reading that.
So
too.
in that situation, or that community, when they come together, what the resulting situation might not be optimal. So you would agree that nuance that you might have some sort of outside force, if not the federal government, something else, to step in. That's all, I just want that. So I'm looking for that.
Sure.
Yes?
I mean, I don't really understand what you just said, but
how do you not understand what I said?
I think I understand.
Oh, no. Well, Joe, how did you not understand what I said?
Because you went to gentrification and you said there were outside people who hated on people who were
yeah.
there, and you were referring that to
I
my
just
community
gave an
outreach.
example.
Was about
Yeah.
No, I know, but I don't understand the fit. That's fine because you've given me now a vague enough argument that I can of course agree on pain of being insane. Of course.
All right,
Yes, there are
yeah.
situations where things may be so horrible that an external force needs to step in. Of course, I agree.
Okay. All right, you know what? She can
I'm
agree.
also so confused. You lost me halfway through there. Like I was starting to think about what you were saying, right? And I was like, wait a second. This isn't making sense to me.
Joe can
Corn
agree
nuts
with
and
me
porn nuts,
in a
kids.
way that
Corn nuts and
infuriates
porn
me.
nuts,
She does this
baby.
all the time. I don't know how she does it, but okay. All right. I'm done for now. But
I'd love to not dodge you. I don't understand what you said.
How did you not? No. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Hold on.
No, wait,
Do it again.
please move on.
No.
It gets uncomfortable
It's too late. It's too late.
when you just argue with me for like 20 minutes, and there are all these people who probably have great
I
voices on
literally
but you're
do
his
not
special
care.
friend.
I let you know that I literally do not care about the rest of these people. That's
I
already
care
done,
about you
right?
guys. I'm so
That's
sorry.
great. I'm letting you know my feelings. I literally do not care
You don't
about
you
any
care
of you.
about me?
All right.
Oh,
So,
I care about you
Joe,
so much,
man.
actually.
I think
Jeez,
Shut up. Everyone shut the fuck up. Joe, I think this is very straightforward. I'm simply saying that we can understand there are communities that have tensions within them. Those tensions,
And
right?
I've already addressed this with you. If if you can come up with that on a Twitch panel and you want to reform policing, then the people in the community who want to reform policing will also think of that and ensure in that system that they account for that. There's no like, if there's some malicious community that's coming up with an ACAB alternative to policing and they only talk to white people or people not affected, then of course that's going to be fucking shit and not going to work. And maybe, yes, there should be external intervention. But you, in attacking me for being utopian, you have created a situation that would never exist. No, I know, I'm just being hyperbolic to get you mad. But like, in telling me that I'm being too utopian, you then in the next breath come up with a psycho situation that belongs on an episode of Black Mirror and would just never occur.
No. Okay. All right.
Now
Here we
let
go.
other people talk.
No.
Please. Oh my god.
No. Oh no! Look, hold on. I feel like we're almost there. I feel like we're seconds away. I do want to hear what everyone else has to say, right? But like, I feel like this is really okay. Like I'm not drawing something that is outlandish. You said a word.
Give
there,
me an
right?
example.
No. I literally just did. I literally did. Hold on.
You gave me an example of gentrification. Give me an example of community policing reform that has had these results.
Let me finish.
I gave you an example. Actually, I gave you 10.
Let me think. Damn.
Let me finish.
Oh my god.
Well, let me finish. I love her. I do love her.
Massacre.
It seems like I don't, but I do, right? And this is how I show my love. All right. So, Joe, you said
2 minutes,
ensure.
guys. I'll be right back.
That's the one thing you said that I'm quibbling over.
Ensure.
You said ensure, yes, but previously you said those community members would come together, they would think of the things that Prime just thought about, right? Of course, because they're intelligent individuals, and they would ensure that they don't run into these pitfalls. That's my problem, right there.
There's the potential that they run into these, but they're not maliciously setting up and to have the results that are so deleterious to the community that you need to involve the federal government instead of going, oh, this system isn't working the way that we planned. Can we change it a bit more? Can we adjust some things, right? Instead of doing that, you want to involve the federal government. I'm assuming it has to be malicious in intent.
Let's look at an example.
Please.
Of local control, right? When you put things in local control and just leave it in isolation, right? We have an example of that. It's outside of policing. We have an example of that here in the States, right? That's the school district. The school district, which is locally run, right? And there's all the stakeholders there will be the parents and property owners, honestly, right? But they'll be the parents. But the contentiousness that happens there, right, where people should just democratically come together and come to a solution, a consensus, like it's vile. We're seeing it happen in real time right now, right? That these communities, and there's a long history of this, right? And oftentimes along racial lines, these things break down and it's a vitriolic. Right,
okay,
so you're
Prime.
saying this community comes together and
so
ensures.
I'm saying this community does something democratically along liberal ideology, what your entire country and my country is built on. And yes, there are problems about underrepresented groups, and yes, there are problems about certain groups having more power. And weirdly, throughout all of academia and all of history, the way to combat this is to be aware of it. Okay, so I'm saying that in most exactly. But then what's your solution? If liberal democracy is bound to fail, inevitably, even when people are aware of it, what would you do instead?
Okay.
No. Thanks.
You're never going to speak until I'm so sorry. No. It's really rude of him, actually. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, what the fuck?
I love her so
much.
Special friend.
He actually is saying it to remind himself to not boot me from the panel.
Okay. All right. Well, you got me there. All right. Look. So what I'm saying, Joe. Shit,
I'm drinking some wine for you guys.
What were you saying?
Could you? I literally lost it. Could you repeat what the last thing you said? I apologize.
I said, obviously for you, democracy is a failure, and there are no solutions to account for groups having different levels of power. Even being aware of that is ultimately going to fail. So we do need some technocratic authoritarian daddy to always step in and snap us on the nose. So please.
The federal government is not some technocratic authoritarian. That's literally another level of democracy. It's literally another level of democracy, right? That's stepping in, understanding that this level may not be working as intended. right?
Yes,
Simply
and
that.
when you
This is
expanded it to that
wonderful.
point,
Oh
I
my
told you,
God.
of course I'd agree with you on that level. I'd be insane not to. Yes, I agree in levels of democracy and checks and balances. Of course I do.
Okay, great. That's all I wanted. That's all I
But
wanted.
That's it?
ultimately,
Wait
I
a
think that things should
second.
be as localized as possible.
There's the but. Here we go. Go ahead, Joe.
Yes, my agreement in the idea of checks and balances and a federal system does not in any way discount that I think primarily things should remain as local as possible.
Agreed. I'm not saying yes.
And what was your
I'm
criticism to begin with? I
Hold
don't
on.
understand you.
There wasn't a criticism. There wasn't a criticism.
Was.
No,
You
no,
were
no, no,
looking
no, no.
for a fight.
No,
You
I
wanted to
wasn't looking
fight
for a
with me.
fight. I actually was looking for a
Please,
fight.
I was trying to fight with
No way.
Captain A. Jones.
Joe, I was not looking for a fight with you. I started this off saying, "Oh, I just want to see if we agree on a principle." That's all I asked for, right? Is that whether an outside force, maybe the federal government, can step in these situations, right? Understanding that that we are flawed human beings living in flawed communities, and that we, because of that, might come up with flawed solutions, right? I might need someone else to help arbitrate that. That's literally my only point the entire time.
Okay, wait. I just want to disagree with you a bit more before we drop it, right? Which is ultimately, I think that my line of when the federal government should step in is a lot further away than your line. And I think that there's a lot of steps within the locality that they can address problems within systems. I think actually, strangely, that localities can fix the own problems in their systems over time, given the time to see what works and doesn't work and allow reform locally. The second they make a mistake, they don't need daddy fed cut to step in and be like, your system isn't working perfectly along racial lines, so we're going to take over and make decisions for you. No, I disagree.
Okay, no. So let's be clear. Sorry, guys.
Free the panelists.
This is my authoritarian side coming out.
I know.
So,
hard to get that little zinger in there.
Joe, I didn't mean that. I meant about the panel. I didn't mean about the panel. Stop it. Joe, okay, all right. Look, I agree that there's probably a lot more steps maybe that you can think of, right? That I will elucidate me. That would definitely, I'll probably end up agreeing with, right? I'm sure you have a whole.
When you talk in specifics, it's so easy, yeah, because reform actually needs to be specific. It's crazy.
Look, I'm not fighting your reform. I'm not fighting your reform.
Give me some daddy. I'm just saying, baby.
Imagining a check on your reform. Right? To understand the reforms aren't perfect. Okay, look. Yes, that's.
When you say that, I'd be a crazy person to disagree with you. Yes, I agree on checks and balances.
This is beautiful.
Either way, but hold on. I'm
not an ANCAP. I'm not some anarchist that's saying everyone should just fucking do whatever they want.
The way you are
Oh, my language? My language.
The way you are describing things, right? Your rhetoric, indeed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Language you can find answers to everything, right? And you can also find the things that give me a migraine. All right. So in that language that you're using, Joe, who I love so much, right? You are saying, you are implying that, well, in this nation, we've had a history of it not just being solved immediately, like the daddy government or whatever you said, right? Coming in and stepping immediately. In fact, things take forever. In fact, we usually don't understand the
She's pretty interesting. I'll give you that. Like Australian streamers, they have an interesting perspective.
Michael Brown,
I really liked
Ferguson,
Missouri, too.
Right?
She was good.
There was a huge problem, and there was the policing.
I think she'd actually come on our stream,
we found that out when Michael Brown died, and we found out that the locality was using the black population to fill in the hole in its budget, right? With fines. So when you tell me, well, that community, we'll see, oh, this is not working, and immediately respond, one, that is this like libertarian argument, right? Like that you have perfect information, right? That you have perfect information.
You're arguing something I'm not arguing. Yes, you need to reform the police.
That's what you said. No.
Shut up. No. I never said. I was not talking about reforming the police, right? We're talking about different things. Of course, reforming the existing institution, which is so ingrained into the bedrock of the nation, takes a hell of a lot of fucking time. But you said, should the federal government step in on behalf of community organizers coming up with alternatives to police? So don't talk to me and give me examples of existing institutional police and federal oversight when I am talking about community alternatives. Yes.
But it's the same principle. We're
It's
talking
not the
about
same principle
no.
because
Yes,
Community policing is how we get slave
Wait,
patrols.
how is community policing
The
again?
point is,
panel.
hold on,
I'm
no.
muting myself and I'm not responding to you.
All right, fine. Well, that's fine.
Not a-
Look,
well,
that's
look,
okay.
I-
Look, this is what it looks like when Joe rage quits. Look, all I'm saying, right? All I'm saying is that all I'm saying is that that the is that when you're talking about a program that the community is putting together. She did rage quit. Ignore her in chat. She did rage quit. This is obviously rage quit, right? She's like,
You're so salty.
No, I literally don't care, right? I literally do not care. I don't care. Let me finish my point, right? So I'm saying that when a community comes together, right? When a community is running some sort of program, right? Not all
Did you guys ever
stakeholders
tell me if
understand all the
rum
problems,
and
right? It may not be
Red Bull is
apparent
good because
unless
I'm
you have
almost
some
out of wine.
large-scale review of that situation, right? So just
It's
to
white
say
rum.
that
It would be white rum.
when if a community is facing issues, that community can necessarily be the ones to fix it. That's the problem. That's all I'm saying, right? Like that they may not be able to do that.
So right, someone very far away who's never experienced anything that community has experienced totally has the answers. No, that's not technocratic at all. You're so right. That's not technocratic at all. That's just that's the solution because community isn't smart enough to come up with a solution to their own
I
problems.
didn't say that. I love Jo when she's talking like this. I actually do love it. I do love it. She's great. She's purposely pushing my buttons now. She's doing a fantastic job. No, that's not what I'm trying to say, right? That they're not smart enough. I'm saying that just the divisions of the community and the power structure of that community may not be conducive to.
And if I have to say it
Equitable
one more
rights
fucking
for the
time,
people,
I will
the
cry.
most marginalized
okay?
people
So I'm going
in
to
the
say
community.
it as clearly as I can. My issue with reformists over revolutionaries is that people reform problems they see within an existing matrix. People who want to abolish the police have a very specific goal. And
We'll give
people
it a
who
go
have
here in
that
a
goal
minute.
to change the way we look at justice are going to be people who account for power disparities in communities that will be built into their planning and policy making, just as you've thought of
I
it
know
now
they
on
see
this
me
panel.
dancing
The
during
good
the,
people, the
during the
good
panels when I do
ACAB
that
yelling
shit.
people have already thought of it too. And they build that into their policy making. And that, yes, it's a risk of liberalism. Carol Pateman writes about it in her criticism of rules. Okay, we see it fucking everywhere. It's a very well acknowledged problem of democracy. And so you know what? Because it's so obvious and well known, we can build in safeguards to policy creation that guard against it. And so I answered your problem 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes ago, and you start being like, but when can the federal government put their foot on my head?
Okay, all right. Well, I love her being toxic. Okay, great. So so she agrees. So she literally just agreed with what I said. That's amazing, right? One of those safeguards being an outside force. I mean, that's part of like the U.S. government. Like, an outside force might have to step in because we have not been able to accomplish our goals. Fair enough. Thank you, Joe, for angrily agreeing. Like, I don't know. All you literally had to say was yes. All you really have to say was yes. We could have been done this on time.
Wow, typical man.
You said yes.
Typical man.
30 minutes
That's
ago.
all. That's all.
You're creating my point, acting like it was yours, and now asking me to submit to you.
Sorry,
it's
guys, I had to
difficult.
jump in. You know how that goes.
Exactly.
Basically a single dad.
She submitted, right? And
doing
all's
the
right in the
thing,
universe
so-
now. Okay, great. I don't know.
That's one thing to know about me if you didn't know
All right.
that. I'm a
Anyway,
single
Chinchilla, you want
father.
to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I
have an
just want
awesome
to say,
kiddo.
like,
She's
you can have, like,
great,
different systems.
excellent
You
student.
can have like different systems that are
She makes me
extremely
goddamn proud to be
decentralized and that are working.
frickin'
And
me.
you can have like extremely centralized systems that are working. Like honestly, I think you guys are just too much like going into the weeds. And when I look at like the Netherlands, we had like a somewhat semi-decentralized system that worked back in the 2000s. And when I looked at like the super like decentralized system within like Belgium in the 90s, it didn't work at all. If I look at like the French system that's like centralized, it kind of works. So you can have all these different kind of systems. You just got to work it out. You got to work it out if they work or not. And if community policing, if you can make that work, right, it's all good. If it doesn't work, probably don't do it. So it's that easy. Just make sure that if you have like a certain system, that you have like counterbalances to that system to make that system work, that kind of stuff. So it's that easy. You know, it's not about like decentralized police, or it's not about centralized police. It's more about making your own system work.
Yeah, and Chinchilla, can I just jump on the tail of that? Because I want to be very clear. I'm against community policing, but I am for community approaches to changing the way that we police communities. So I don't like community policing, but I like the community to create their own alternatives.
Yeah, but this is the thing. Like, what do you mean by community policing? Like, honestly, like
it's
you
a really
can have,
specific
like,
thing. So it's when the community report on one another.
Yeah, it's dangerous. It's exactly what's happening with the Texas abortion law.
Right.
Actually, that's a really good comparison.
Yeah.
But you can have, you could say like the community have some more of input compared to what's currently like going on. Like you can have like different ways of like approaching this whole ordeal. But that being said, if like the definition that you provided is saying like, well, it means like the community is the police. Like obviously, like I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I think kind of what a little bit of the disconnect was that when Joe was talking about problems to the systemic problems created by the current system of policing, she wasn't saying there's no problems outside of it. Like obviously there's problems where individuals and parts of communities might be racist, and no matter what systemic changes you make, even they're still going to say racist, which I think is what Prime wanted to address, right? Prime wanted to address, hey, well, if the community, like, it doesn't matter if the community comes up with this really good system reform, if there's still a lot of individual racism and people, and the result of the individual racism on the system is to make it so that there are, racist outcomes, then it doesn't matter how great your problem to systemic racism is, because there's still the problem of like internal biases and stuff.
Yeah, and I would like to add before CTV does, just to cut in before him, that this is actually just a real big. This is really the consequence of the war on drugs, and that's what happens when you have a police force that only looks for drugs. That's something I don't know. What's up, CTV? How's it going?
Hey, you would have been proud of me. I'm not sure if you were here before CTV, but like I did the whole thing on the war on drugs and how it's damaging us, our society, and policing. I really did all that. I think you would have liked it. So just putting that out there for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that my words have carried so much weight with all of you. I mean, it's obvious that that they are the truth, right? So why wouldn't you be listening? So, the thing that troubles me when it comes to community policing, right, is it specifically by the community participating in the laws that are passed, it allows everyone to have a voice in it. And then whenever it's not backed up by law, right, it then leaves the door open to actors in the community to operate outside of the law and then have no measure of accountability.
I think I understand. I think I understand. So you're interpreting community policing in this instance to mean like an anarchist state, where instead of the police and laws, it's just people governing one another. Correct? That's how you're interpreting.
Yeah, and I think the most relevant example that I would point to would be like instances where Sharia law in places, right? Where like they've tried to institute things like that, where it's like it's not, because it's not governed by law, there's no actual system of accountability that applies to everyone the same, and then it can end up disproportionate as to who it's actually inflicted upon.
And I would agree with you. I'm definitely not an anarchist, and I totally disagree with community policing. I think you need laws, and I think you need a police infrastructure. I just don't think it should look anything like it does now. And I think that coming up with alternatives those alternatives should be sourced from the community who have a really good understanding of the problems that they face in terms of crimes and violence.
So then it seems like the most relevant way to fix this thing would be to change the laws, which would then make us go back to the more
Decriminalization is a huge part. Yeah.
right. Change the laws. I mean, because if it's not against the law, then there's no reason for the police to try to enforce it, which brings us back to the drug war, right? So,
Like I
Could.
said,
I'm gonna agree with
that's
you on the drug
exactly
war.
what I was
Hey,
saying.
we need to
it
kill
all
that
goes back to the
right
drug
away.
war.
That's killing everything. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest reason we have people in prison, nonviolent offenders. I mean, I don't even need to go down that.
So, Joe, on that, I'm not looking for a fight. I'm
Yes,
I'm
you
looking
are.
for. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Don't
You
lie.
keep saying
Don't
that.
lie.
I'm looking for information from you because you have more of an insight on this than I do. So
don't lie. Don't
The
lie.
lie detector test
I don't.
determined that
you know
was
what?
a
Okay,
lie.
so I'm gonna say something to Joe. But like, putting that aside just for a moment, I think what Joe and I need, I think we need an intervention. I think our communication, like this happens to us all the time, and
No trouble communicating with anyone else.
no, yeah, no,
So that's
no,
your
exactly.
communication problem.
No,
Don't
no,
make that into personal.
okay. It's words like
on.
that. No, it's words like
Yeah.
that. Okay, because like I'm like, hey, like I'm trying to find a consensus here, right? And then she dumps this sentence on me, right? That she knows it's gonna set me off. She knows she's all right. Anyway, so I'm thinking maybe we should have like I'm thinking right now maybe we should have like book smarts or something because I think he does this right. Like he looks at like the rhetoric of a channel, right? Like let's have someone. Some like a linguist or something like that. I don't know. Maybe someone like that might exist somewhere. Look at this and like understand like what are the differences in our communication so that maybe we can avoid these things in the future and have more harmonious discussions. I think that might be a good idea. Anyway, the question I was going to ask you, and I'm actually going to try to do that. The question I was going to ask you is about Australia. Because you guys don't have the same past that we have in terms of drug enforcement. At least I don't think, right? Is the drug war? Or let me ask you: is the drug war there anything like what it is here?
Well, we don't have okay, it's different state to state. So in my state, it's legal to have marijuana, grow your own marijuana, smoke marijuana. Like that's completely legal. Like weed is pretty much there's nothing you can't do with weed here. But that's not true of any other state. And like certainly cocaine, meth, mushrooms, LSD, that sort of stuff, that's not legal.
Okay. But in terms of like the toxic effects of the drug war, so things are illegal. But in how I guess that drug war is carried out, does it look anything like
Prison.
it does in the U.S.?
It's people go to prison.
Mass incarceration though, like
not
so
mass incarceration. We don't have mandatory minimums, so it's different, obviously. But we still need further drug decriminalization. We need all the other states to follow Canberra and ACT, and then we need that to go on to other drugs as well.
Because our drug war, has fallen along racial lines again. Everything here in the States, right? Sorry, someone in chat told me that I have to agree with Joe with whatever she says, deleting that comment. All right, moving on.
There's probably like the most base comment that you've had in chat, at least as far as your political ideology is concerned.
I will start timing people out if they put that kind of toxic messages in my chat. But no,
can I get that message copied and pasted like 10 times in the chat? That's what I need.
Yeah, I'm copying and pasting right now.
Copy and paste, folks. Copy and paste.
It's gonna be 10 people. It's gonna be muted. Pretty much right. But Joe, so what I'm trying to understand is the scope of the issue. So like our problem has fallen along racial lines and expanded from there, right? So you don't have the exact same history, though you do have an indigenous population that does suffer more. So would that?
So what was that? I missed that, and I feel it was wrong. So can you just repeat it?
Probably was.
I was asking.
I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you. I asked
No.
What if it's dabbing time, guys? If it's dabbing time, is it dabbing time?
So I'm trying to
understand. Dabbing bingo, baby.
The drug war has done so much to shape policing in America. That's what we were talking about previously, right? It has done so much to shape policing in America. So I'm trying to understand, has it done the same in Australia as well? Or do you have other forces, do you think, that are maybe more significant in your policing? So that those are things you have to address.
2 ones
Right?
enough
If
for
we
me.
were trying to dismantle policing as we know it here in the States, right, it would have to start with the drug war. CTV is actually completely right there, right? But maybe it's different in Australia. That's what I'm asking about.
Well, I'd say drugs and homelessness, like the policing of
This
homelessness
is some
in
haze
Australia
concentrates. It's called
huge,
Tropical
and that's
Splash.
related to
It's
drugs
really
as
good.
well.
I actually quite
And
enjoy
we
it.
have a history of creating laws that affect particular groups. So obviously the same sort of thing. I don't think that just because we don't have the drug war in the same way doesn't mean that the policing of drug use doesn't affect us in a similar way.
I would say sex.
Mike, if you ever come over, I'm going to give you the fattest
I'm
dab.
purging chat.
Prostitution. I mean, prostitution, pornography, like all these things, right? Like in reality, two adults should be able to make whatever decisions that they want to make between themselves, regardless of what the implications of fucking anything are, because they are two consenting adults, right? So then, like,
or 3
after
or 4
that,
or 5 consenting
it'd
adults.
be the same argument CTV that people would make about drugs, right? Which is that sure you can reduce the criminalization of sex work, but you still need to have some sort of criminalization of trafficking, and the two are inextricably linked. So you would need to have some force available to stop human trafficking.
So then the easiest way to do that is, as soon as you find out somebody is trafficking, is to actually hold them to the fullest extent of the law possible, instead of ever allowing, right? Like, how is it? This is one of the things that's always boggled my fucking mind, right? But how is it that you can get 40 to 50 fucking years in this country for a drug charge possession, right? But then, like, when it comes to rape, you'll only get like 8 to 12 years. How does that make any? How does that make any fucking sense to me? The level of violence is so far and away fucking different. Like, what the fuck is going on here when it comes to the judges, right? Like Charlie Daniels, which I'm sure that probably nobody here even knows who the fuck Charlie Daniels is, right? But he wrote a song called Simple Man, right? He's like, when the panty waist judges just let the fucking people go, right? Whenever they've done such heinous fucking shit against the fucking society, all you end up doing is creating a level of mistrust from the people to the very government that's supposed to be holding people accountable when they do dumb shit.
So, like,
By the way, I know who Charlie Daniels is very well, okay? I may be a leftist, but I love some Charlie Daniels sometimes.
There you go. There you go.
But I know that the trafficking laws around, like, Australia are, like, way more extended compared to the US. Like, if you bring on some seed that's not radiated, so it cannot, like, go out, or like however you want to call it.
Really,
like,
there's like 2 songs of his I like, but they're pretty
Australia
funny.
Has like way.
I mean, who doesn't like The Devil Went Down to Georgia? It's a great song, man.
Like trafficking and stuff and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just want to say that.
I have
almost all my
question.
interactions with the cops have been on the road.
Yeah. Same right.
I have a question, right? If we were to make some drugs legal, would it be safe to say that some of the people that have been incarcerated for drugs be released early or have reduced time?
If they have if the only thing that they've been convicted of is a drug charge, I would have them released immediately. Now, if they have ever crossed what I would call like a line of violence, maybe they decide to shiv a fucking another inmate. Well, you know what? You got to answer for that shit, buddy. Right? But as long as you ain't done some shit like that, you've never fucking crossed like the line of violence, right? Which would include like holding up a fucking liquor store or like, you know, pointing a gun at someone, like any of these fucking things that crosses that line. And it was just simple drug possession of whatever fucking amount. I don't give a fuck really if you had a whole airplane full of fucking weed, right? Fly that shit over my fucking house, drop it off, bro. We're having a fucking party at CTV's. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, like I don't actually give a fuck about the plant. I don't give a fuck about the substance.
Okay,
I
so
do.
before you guys continue your fight, my special friend Joe, that I love so much, as I've demonstrated today, is going to have to leave us, and oh so soon. I love interacting with Joe. Believe me, just believe me on that. I love interacting with Joe. She's an amazing individual. Thank you so much for being so kind as to join us and share your thoughts on this. And I'd like to dig into this more sometime. By digging into, I just really want to know your thoughts. I don't want to fight you. I just want to know your thoughts because I'm really
That's what
curious.
you say every time.
That's why
I just want to know your thoughts.
I want to know your thoughts. Why? Let me misrepresent everything you just said and then ask if that's what you said. I'm kidding. I'm leaving you with something. I'm leaving you with something.
I love.
Okay.
I love my friend Joe. She means so much to me. Special friend Joe, and she means she means the world to me. And you need to understand that you're not part of this community unless you understand how much I love my friend Joe. Exclamation point Joe in chat. If you wanted to find her, she is streaming both in like her Twitch channel, right? She's streaming there and she's blowing it up. She's been streaming like nightly. She's been doing a really good job. I've been jumping into her chat and like everyone's engaged, everyone's loving what she's doing there. I think you'll love it too. So give her a follow there. Jump into her YouTube. She has a video there, and that video is amazing, right? It blew up, it exploded, right? Just one video and exploded the internet, right? You want to be a part of it. A second video is coming out, right? One day. I promise.
One day. I promise to.
And I have been promising that for months. That you will get that next video. And you want to be there when it drops. You want to be one of the first people to watch it, right? And so sign up for a YouTube channel, right? Subscribe there for her YouTube channel. Like, comment, and harass her into making that video again. All right, Joe, thank you so much. Love you so much.
Guys, bye.
Joe, have a good night.
Wait. I'm gonna say my name really quick. What?
All right, here
I just wanted to say
that. You see that? See that?
Oh.
Be good. Huh?
I just wanted to. Oh man, she left. I was just gonna say I agree with her.
Of course she did. She got the boss she was waiting for.
What was that? I don't even know what you're talking about, but all right.
It's okay. You don't have to know. It's all right.
All right, fair enough.
Okay.
Yuji, finish what you're saying.
Oh, because here in my state in Baltimore, we have these places called no-shoot zones, where it's basically people in the community dictate these special zones where there should be no gun violence or anything. And they talk to the police and they talk to mayors and stuff, and it kind of works itself out.
So we already have zones like that, right? Like no. Like we have like no gun zones. There's a name for that, and I'm like blanking on it right now. But we have those, right? But I guess the difference you're seeing is that the police is the community is actually bought into it and are working with them. Okay.
Yes.
Well, like I mean, notoriously, like when I see, like when I see that little sign that says drug-free zone, I'm like, well, duh. I mean, I can't sell or do drugs here, so I mean, the little sign says so. So
naturally, you're not going to do it.
I'm not going to do that. But right? I mean, it would do that. That's like the sign is clearly stating not to do it. So just don't do it. I wouldn't do that.
Never violate what the sign says. Nobody has ever
personally
done that.
never violate a sign.
Ever.
So I know I
love that
know
sign.
from I know from some farmers in Vermont, like basically they have some trouble with because they have to put up like post-its like signs basically on the farm that you're not allowed to hunt there. Because they have that.
I thought he said something else.
No, but basically what happens is that they post all these things, and then every time they come back within like 2 months, all the signs are like basically gone. Just like pretty interesting, you know. And basically it comes down to like people.
Talk to me, guys. What do you think about this?
No.
What do you think about policing? How should it be reformed? What should we do different? What is your guys' ideas? You're telling me everything about what people think.
Let's let him Victoria. She hasn't gotten a chance to talk.
Give me a shout out in the chat. Tell me what you guys are thinking about this stuff.
Thank you, Victoria.
You came in like 45 minutes ago.
I know.
You came in at the worst time.
I see that.
when Joe and I are having, and this is, look, guys, if you're gonna be here, this is gonna happen every so often. Joe will walk in here, she'll say something. I'll say, "Hey, Joe, that's completely reasonable. I just would like to explore your thoughts on this. Would you agree on this one thing? Would you agree on this one fucking thing?"
Prime.
Right? And no, this is what happens. No.
Was really pointed.
I say that. I say, like, will you agree on this one thing? Does that sound reasonable to you, right? And she'll say, like, yeah, but, right? And then I'm like, okay, well, let's explore that but a little bit, right? And then she's like, well, you're misrepresenting my point. And I'm like, no, all I'm doing is trying to understand your point. And okay, but so when that happens, just to let you know, when that happens.
Did you just say you want to explore that butt?
God damn it, CTV!
I knew you was going there.
Did you just say you wanted to explore that butt?
No, you stop it.
DJ, you and I
stop
both
it.
know people that you
I'm
do
just
not
asking
want
the
to
question. I
have
don't know.
No.
Stop it, CTV. Stop it, CTV.
Now I see what you mean by special friend.
Yes.
Even if you have a gun. Because the difference is the will to use it.
It drives me fucking crazy. Any which way, in that case, I will literally ignore the rest of you. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to ignore everything you fucking
Sorry for
say.
that.
I don't give a shit.
Every
because I gotta
social
work
should
it
have
out.
a gun, though.
I can't think of anything else. But like dealing with that issue, she like stun locks my brain when she does this. Like I literally cannot do anything else. So sorry, I'm
You can't hear
unlocked.
me?
Go ahead.
Welcome back.
Not to
Now
misrepresent.
Oh, it's brutal tonight.
Oh man, that's
Oh,
something
man.
mute right there.
Sounds like
No, but no, I was just gonna say like the whole sign thing. I was just
Hey,
gonna make a
duty.
joke about like that Arthur episode of like this sign
Well, I have
can't
it up
stop me. I
because when
can't
I
read.
click into the
But
panel,
no, like
it's going to be loud.
my big thing
'cause
is
you'll
that
hear me in the panel.
like if you ever look into police by like outside of like the country, just in the United States by itself, if you look at like how each state, each county, each region does its policing, there is no set standard for training for like anything. Like every county, every state, everything does their own type of policing. There should be some kind of
Sleep
set
is good,
standard
duty.
for how these things are done. Like genuinely, it shouldn't just be well, hey, let's just have everybody do whatever the fuck they want. It should be,
The
hey,
difference between
they should
people
have
that-
a minimum
people
of
that,
like 9 months
have
training
guns for
at least,
protection
at
and people
minimum,
who have the will
before
to use
being able
those
to go out
guns
and be a police officer.
aggressively.
Like 3
and
months
without
for
cause or reason.
the overall, this is how you're
Before
supposed to be a
people
cop,
can
and then
defend
6
themselves with
months
said
for
guns.
this is what we do in our county.
I guess they're already
Something
there,
like
though,
that,
huh?
at least at a minimum.
But this could be
But
like
I'm
actually
tangled
like
on
tie
guns,
into
man.
like Prime's
I
whole
like
case,
guns,
because Prime
and
was like talking about like
I
community
don't personally
policing and,
want to own any myself, but I
if you have
understand
like
the reason why people
more
do.
trained police officers,
That's
right? You might be able
I
to
also
do,
worry about
like,
our
more
communities
of
with guns.
This
I
ideal
see it
Prime
from
was
two
talking
different
about, like,
perspectives.
basically like community policing.
Especially having a kid,
So,
going to schools, you
like,
worry
these
about
things
that
can
shit.
tie into each other.
I don't want my
Like,
kid getting shot
would
up
you
at
agree
junior
with
high
that?
school just because some dude
Victoria?
went freaking psycho.
I'm so sorry.
She ignored you. Go ahead.
I
Try
did.
it
I
again.
did not. I like. No. Sorry, I had.
I just got curved.
I'm so sorry. No. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm so sorry. Please repeat that.
No,
I'm so sorry.
basically, you were asking for police officers to have like more of like a national or like a federal training, right?
Right. Yes.
And therefore, if you have that kind of training, then you could maybe say like you could work more to Prime's ideal of like having community policing, like in combined with each other. Would you agree
See,
with that?
I don't necessarily agree with the community policing just like how I believe it was. I forgot who had mentioned it. Basically, the thing that's going on in Texas, where it's like, oh, if you notice a woman who's getting an abortion, hey, fucking call the number and win a prize.
That's not community policing.
But what is community policing then? Because they had asked the question earlier, what would you consider community policing? And that's exactly what they said.
Yeah, that was an interesting topic because of the fact that I thought that it was the involvement of community, and so the silly series was more about along the lines that the community is the policing. So that's the difference. So yeah,
the problem with community
I think the problem with community policing is that you always get that one person that wants to fucking take control of the situation instead of waiting for the fucking cops themselves. I think the neighborhood watch is supposed to let the police know about crimes. I think that's like a good thing about what they do when it comes to like community policing.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that. I wouldn't really want to get into a place where like I had the community policing everything, because people can turn into social pariahs. Communities can turn into social pariahs within those communities, and then in turn they get targeted, and then you have that smaller community within that community getting targeted, and it's just as bad as you were off before. You know, you end up in the same cycle of abuse.
Right.
Well, I kind of want to bring up, I think someone brought up earlier too, where like they want police officers to like be in the town where they're like familiar with or whatever. I don't know exactly how the point goes, but one of the things that is kind of one of the obvious things that could be brought up, where if you're policing the people who you know personally, that could cause some conflicts of interest within that community as well. So like when it comes to community policing, you don't really get around that either.
And that's also something I thought about. Well, I think that's a good thing in the essence of connecting with the community. On another level, it could possibly put them in harm's way because they are living in that community too, which makes them much more accessible to the people that they're policing who may not like the way they're policing. So there's a couple ways to look at it, but I think overall it's probably a net benefit to have them in the community, really. I don't think you're going to see as much violence against them directly that close to home anyways, because it's going to blow back right on those people.
Well, it really depends. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, CTV.
Well, I was just going to ask if anybody remembers seeing that cop in American Pie 2, right? Like, I really feel like that if she was giving me some direction, I might listen. You know what I mean? Or maybe the cop in Days of Thunder, right? When she reached around there and said she was looking for a weapon, right? Like I feel like maybe she could get my attention. You know what I mean?
But regardless, I think there, besides your Kuma brain CTV, I appreciate that. But besides that, like honestly, I have it as well. So, besides that, I think like having community involved in your policing is like valuable because when I saw like basically like we have like neighborhoods and we don't have like neighborhood watches.
I have half of mine. I think he's the reason I got on that hippy dippy panel.
We
I
have
think he
like
kind of
communication
was
channels and stuff like that.
He doesn't agree
that we
with me,
can
but I think
address
he knows
certain
I'm
things,
genuine.
and then we can also like figure out things because I live in so-called Dutch ghetto. So basically in that way we can sort things out, and we have like a community that's basically doing some sort of the policing. That doesn't mean like it's like the community is like having like people on the streets and that kind of stuff, right? It's not like that. And like honestly, like I don't know how Prime figures it, like, but it's like in general, it's like an interesting topic.
Just remember, guys,
like,
George
how do you
Zimmerman was
protect your own
community policing.
How do you protect your own neighborhood and that kind of stuff?
When he
can I
killed
suggest
Trayvon Martin.
one thing, Chinchilla?
Yeah, sure.
In the just to further kind of your point about protecting your own neighborhoods, one thing that's really good for protecting neighborhoods is WD-40. You might want to use it on your chair because it's very squeaky.
Oh,
and
yeah,
it would definitely protect the neighborhood from the squeaks.
That's why I fucking mute myself all the time.
Going on?
Yeah.
I didn't have an accent.
What you saying? What you saying?
It just gives what he says character, right?
I can't understand you.
Prime called me in to yell at Joe. I did the opposite, and then fucking and now here I am calling out squeaky chair. So.
Yeah, you instead tried to yell at me the entire time. I wasn't the one who called you out. We're
just gonna call you Captain Squeaky Chair from now on. That's it.
Call me in
went
for
on a
backup.
whole tirade against you, and then you aimed your fire at me.
Unbelievable. What are you talking? Wait, seriously?
No, I'm serious. I'm serious. She's talking about your ACAB remark.
Oh my god.
She went on a whole tirade. And I defended you. I called you pretty, and then you come in, and then all this happens. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
This is
right?
unbelievable.
So Anthony
discrimination.
Jones got bad aim.
I feel like the crowd turns against me. Look, Joe. Look, I don't blame you. Joe is a special, a wonderful, amazing, fantastical person, right? But she's often wrong. She is often wrong. But when she comes on, she dazzles my
I'm
audience.
drinking water,
She
baby.
dazzles you, and you end up cheering for her. Cheering for like take a look at yourselves. Take
What
a
do you
look at
think she was
yourselves.
wrong about? I'm
Like,
curious. What do
Take
you
a
think
look
she was
at
wrong about?
yourselves. She was.
Yeah,
I'm
he
absolutely
is
not in agreement
still-
with her, but
look
I
at
just
him.
had to let
Look
you
at this
go,
man.
man.
He is
You
still-
wanted
he is-
to go.
No. Pan is still under her spell. He can't help it. Look, man, snap out of it. I tell you. Like this is
Jeez.
like.
Jeez.
So all I'm saying.
You never let anybody in, so
No, I couldn't fuck everyone else. No, fuck everyone else.
Wait. Hold on.
That's
Question.
something else.
Like, I'm the only conservative in the room, so let me ask a question, right? So, like, we all know that whatever it is that Joe's opinion was, it was the most base one in the room.
There we go.
Right?
There we go. You
all
were
know
dazzled
this.
by her. You were.
We all
She
know
was
this.
talking about localism and how communities
right?
know themselves better than some federal technocrat.
especially like
Yeah,
whenever,
except
like,
that we
I
know
press
that's not
the
always the
question.
fucking case. We literally know that's like we have a plenty of examples that actually not being the case. You all know those examples,
Based.
but when Joe says it, all of a sudden you guys forget about it. I'm all literally just reminding you of that case, and I'm not saying that localism is a bad thing. In fact, I was agreeing with it, right? I was agreeing with that, and then just adding that, like, well, but sometimes you need intervention because the local community fails because they're made of individuals. Individuals are flawed, right? That's literally my entire case. That was all it was, right? And you can see it because once again, Joe and her marvelous eyes, right?
It's
has,
what
like,
I was
has
sitting here
hypnotized you
saying,
all.
right?
Hypnotized you
You
all.
guys
You're
heard
like,
me
oh, I
saying
guess
this
Joe must
shit,
be
right?
right. Oh, I guess she actually was.
Thanks
but
for
I
the
was adding
imaginary
to her point.
9002.
That was it.
Thanks
That was it.
Can I? May I provide just a little bit of constructive criticism? So let me see. So like I was watching this entire thing, right? And I came in and I was ready. I was like, oh, Joe just said something about me. I'm coming in hot. You know what I mean? And then I get in here, and the first thing you say, I'm just gonna be honest. You went on a sentence and it never stopped. It was like a one sentence rant that didn't have like a comma anywhere. And so it's very hard. And this is coming from me.
It was like listening to a Hunter S. Thompson
for
book.
me. Yes, it's coming from the guy who backstabbed me, right? After I defended you. No, it's coming from my backstabber. Oh, yes, my backstabber thinks, oh, no, you were being unreasonable. Thank you. All right, anyway.
Don't penalize me. Don't penalize me. Don't penalize me because Captain Jones got, bad aim. I was just listening.
Look,
Sorry. We don't have to
Sorry.
relitigate. We don't have to relitigate me being right. Okay. I think.
Okay, but
had time. We've had time. Hold on. Shut up. We've had time to all like breathe, right? To get away from the source that's bedazzled the rest of you, right? She's gone, right? The bat lady is gone, and now only the rest of us are here, and we can move forward with the understanding that I was always correct. All right.
Did you say the bad lady?
Yeah, we can
Thank you.
move forward.
And if anyone says
move forward.
otherwise,
So
if anyone says otherwise, then I'm sure they're asking for a mute, right? Right?
Yeah,
Did you say the
moving on.
bad? Did you say the bad lady
Okay.
though?
Yeah,
The bad lady? I'm
The
just
bad
asking.
lady.
The bad
yes,
lady.
The bad lady.
The
yes.
bad
She
lady?
was
Is that like?
Calling a
Is
woman a
that like?
witch.
lady
Yeah, but
is
is that like
gone.
code word?
So-
Is that like code
No, it's
word?
not code word for anything. Leave it alone.
Are you sure it's
All
not
right.
code word for mistress?
Okay, great.
Teach
Are we
No.
sure? Are we sure she left of her free will in the restaurant?
I don't know.
Prime, did you not give her permission to leave? Whoa. Whoa. That's okay.
Okay. All right.
Prime,
so anyway,
Prime.
yeah.
So, Prime, I think I'm still on her spell. Can you help me out, man? Like, what's going on here? Like,
We're moving on. We're moving on to a different topic. I don't.
What's the different topic? So I'm still on her spell. So like, help me
I
out
don't
here.
care. So I'll mute you if you need me to help you.
I don't need
let's
to.
continue on.
Oh, brothers.
Anyway,
Brothers and
so,
sisters, thank
yeah,
you so much for hanging out with me. I got 8 of you in here with
Joe
me.
brought up an example of alternative policing.
Thank you
Does
so
anyone
much
have
for
another?
chilling.
Oh, I actually
Yeah,
do.
well,
I
I
do.
just wanted to say, to move it along a little bit, I think that one of the main problems we have is the incentive structure and how cops are basically like ranked and awarded based on how many arrests they get, not how safe they help the community, which incentivizes them. It gives them perverse incentives to, go to low-income areas and find victimless crime so that they can pad their stats. I think that one of the biggest ways we can, stop all of this is to stop incentivizing arrest and start incentivizing responses to community calls, because a lot of cops out there really don't they spend most of their time patrolling, like 80+%, and they don't spend their time responding to community calls. But that's where you need cops the most, when you actually call them in and ask for them. So I think that if we started rewarding cops more based
I
on
still
how
think
how
we
many
should
calls they
just
responded to,
not
rather
have
than how many
cops.
black kids they arrested, that might also improve things a little bit.
Like, let's just
Hello,
have cops that
Tequila?
for
Yeah,
people that
so I
murder
think
people
there's like
or
1,000
steal
ways
from
of
people
like
or hurt
organizing
people.
your own police in your own state. Like Victoria actually brought up a really good point, that you want to have like a nationalized or a federalized, like a way of educating those police people. So you have all the polices that have the same line of education, and I think that's one start to like having the same barrier of entry
Sometimes it
on
seems like it.
education for those police, and that makes it so that those people basically have some barrier of entry, right? It's like you don't want to have like police that aren't like educated on certain topics and do certain things, and you definitely want to have like as like a country in itself, you want to have like a specific like point of entry, like to say this is a police officer and this isn't, right? So maybe you can have like still you can have like certain people that do like writing out fines for like what you call like when you parking tickets, like stuff like that. But when it comes to real police works, right, you gotta have like some serious like police and with some serious education that they can be backed up.
Debating a
Do you think that the
graphics
police
card.
currently have that serious education?
Well, Victoria said that it was basically like different
Yeah.
between like
Every
the
state, every
counties.
county, everything is different. Like there are no like I can't say there are no two places that are the same, but it's vastly different. Like if you look at like LA County versus like fucking somewhere in Louisiana, you think the policing is going to be the same? Absolutely not. Like even the standards aren't going to be the same. The way that they're trained, how long they're trained, how many hours they have to do before they can become a cop. Like there wasn't even like a few years ago where it was finally like some of those like really small podunk towns that are like 3 sheriffs towns were like, oh yeah, we're finally requiring our police to have high school diplomas.
So when
Come
you talk
on.
about that, when you're talking about like, it's like that also incentivizes like having like police officers in different counties having like different approaches when being like pulled over. So maybe in one county you can be pulled over and it's like they are just relaxed and they're just cool with you, and in another country they are almost about to pull their gun whatever you do, So I think those things need to be more on like a on a national level, that it's like more qualified, like it's more like
Are you saying that the police culture from countries are different?
Counties.
Yeah,
Or
like counties, but also like countries.
The countries too.
There should be a
but
there
counties, yeah.
federal regulation and standard for police licensing and education and things like that. There should also be a database for police who do wrong to others. Like specifically abuse their power. Basically assault people or use excessive force. Those things should be available in a federal database. And I think that you absolutely, the community should have a role in how to police the police. Jesus, man.
Mhm.
Like, that's the least that could happen. And that's on a base level. I mean, really, I'm more like on the side of the less police, the better, So, but that's my compromise.
So
I
I
wanna
think the
push
problem here is like this is heavily dependent on like individual communities. Well, I agree that like having a standardized like fucking training is a good thing. Depending on what type of cop you're really going for, the type of standardization gets a little bit more uniform. So like if you're going for a state cop, like a statey or whatever, like It's pretty normal, like pretty coherent throughout most states to be relatively equivalent. But if, like you said, if you're going for some like sheriff in a podunk town with like 3 fucking people in it, it's gonna vary greatly depending on like what county you're in. But like the higher, like state cops, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Where the training should be standardized, even for those fucking like random fucking sheriffs. But when it comes to like the less cops, the better. I don't know. It just depends on the community, right? Like, you can have less cops in like a wealthier neighborhood than you can in like a really poor neighborhood, right?
So I just want to kind of take a step back real quick, because like I was saying before, like, you know, community policing, it's all about WD-40, and I just wanted to point out, because I was just on the setting where it gave me the video of the person making the most noise. Somebody else was talking, and all I saw was chinchilla vaping. It was actually kind of beautiful. But it was just kind of funny too, and it made me think of the squeaky chair again. So here I am.
What'd you
Really on
say?
that squeaky chair.
I'm here with no point other
Man's
than memes. I'm just here for the memes, y'all.
Phalanx, do you have anything to say?
No, I was just saying, like, so depending on, like I said, the type of cop you're going for, the amount of training can be more consistent. So like the state cop is going to have pretty consistent training depending on the state, but even the state training between states are pretty comparable. But a lower level cop, like say a fucking county sheriff or whatever, the training might vary greatly from a county in like California versus a county in like fucking West Virginia or something. So I think it's a good idea to have like a standard training for whatever level of cop you choose to be. That's a really good idea. But what I wanted to get to is like the least amount of cops, the better, might not necessarily be the best prescription depending on the particular area you're in, right? Like if you're in a really like highly crime,
well, you could base
area,
that off of police engagement. That would be a really easy thing to do. I mean, there are analytics that they could run to determine where they need more cops and less, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm kind of getting at. Like, but we already kind of do that. Like, for the most part, like, I don't know, like a Chicago police department is going to have far more police than like a police department in like a fucking town with like 60 people in it, right? Like, we already do that.
But this is not that difficult at all. It's like basically saying like you need to have like a specific like a cop training, right? That everybody in the nation has, but then also have like some training when you towards like your own like cop district, like that kind of shit, right? So you can have like a 2-year like education about being like a cop, and then have like 2 months or 3 months, or I don't know what you wanna, how long you wanna make the education. Like, but you can make that specific. You can make like a specific area within the training dedicated to the area that
Thanks
you
for the
are
follow,
in,
Willard.
so that you get like specific
You adapt to that shit.
like training on that.
I smoke weed and
that
talk
area.
politics, dabs and debates.
And also,
Right?
to be clear too, like cop training doesn't just stop after you get done with like, you know, fucking police school, right? Like they continue
Police
their
school?
training throughout. Well, fucking not police school. Fucking
Police academy. That's a
officer
thing.
training.
Police academy.
No. Yeah, police daycare. Police daycare. Go ahead.
That was a great movie. However, I like that movie.
Phalanx, sorry. Go on.
No, I was just saying, like, they continue their training throughout most of their career, right? Like, they constantly are doing, like, certain training to, like, keep up with, like, their certifications or whatever.
Yeah, okay. Chinchilla?
Yeah, so I definitely think that I looked in, like, a police like, education within the US. Like, one thing that it like is really like troublesome is like when you talk about like de-escalation.
That's for you, Withered.
So yeah, you definitely want to look into that and have like more de-escalation training than compared to like shooting gun training. That's one thing that I'm feeling like really strong about. Like I think that when you talk like about like de-escalation, like every like person that gets shot, regardless if they are innocent or if they are fucking guilty, it's wrong. You don't want to shoot certain people, right? So yeah, maybe at some point you need to. That's the issue. But Then again, yeah.
Hey, Victoria, could you do me a favor and keep yourself muted?
I'm
Because sometimes
sorry.
we get some. Yeah, no problem.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Yeah. Okay. So I think maybe we've explored this. Titan,
Sorry,
do you have anything to say? Like you've been here.
They're talking about community
do
police
you want to add
reform.
anything, Titan? Or are you just literally showing off your graphics card? Is that literally the only reason?
It's pretty
Yeah,
good.
well, yeah. You have like a problem with that? Like, what the fuck?
I don't. I like Titan, so I'll just. That's fine.
Yeah, I don't really give a shit about this topic. If it does, great. But right now, I'm just like browsing Reddit. So if
I was
got
gonna
something
say
else to
Titan.
add,
According
enjoy.
to everybody else, they'd rather see the rabbit.
Yeah, nobody wants to smoke weed.
Everybody wants to see the rabbit. Everybody wants to see the rabbit.
What rabbit are we talking about? Are we like
Okay,
an
so
actual
they-
rabbit or
An actual rabbit.
No, it's not an actual rabbit. Okay,
Or
so
a
as
dildo?
No, So now that I'm like finally settled down here in Chicago, my mom got
Wait,
me,
what are we
like,
talking
like
about?
this
How do
math
we get on
file.
hentai porn?
Fine.
Put the rabbit on. Put the rabbit on.
Yeah, I don't need to look at a graphics card
Thanks
that's
for
like
the
way
follow,
better than
later.
mine.
Well, it's
Like
only
the-
like twice as good as mine. Yeah, fuck.
This talk is already too graphic
There
for
we
me.
go.
I don't.
Hell
It's this shit, okay?
Yes, the rabbit.
I got this massive fucking bunny as a movie and gift. Okay, so look at this shit. All right.
Dude, that thing looks like the rabbit out of fucking Monty Python. That thing's
Oh
terrifying.
man, it's not real.
What the fuck?
And
How's
this thing
that
is like
terrifying?
this thing's
Holy
like 20
shit! Look
pounds
at its
too.
eyes.
Okay, Prime.
Look at its
time to wrap it
stare.
up.
That just lifeless stare.
Well, it's not alive.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that makes it
I
more
think
lifeless.
creep-
That,
I think
you're
it
just-
would. Do you think it would be
There you are.
less or more creepy if its eyes were alive and making around?
$1 billion.
I think that
I
would
would
be a lot
honestly
more
probably
creepy.
pass out. I'd probably pass out.
You guys trying to
Yeah,
make
so
me
I mean, I think we should be
feel
happy it has
Could you
lifeless
imagine
eyes.
if the eyes moved around?
Could you imagine if there's blood coming out of the eyes and out of the mouth?
Jeez, come on.
Eyes?
Okay,
are
let Prime
gonna-
talk.
I'm not gonna lie.
If it just was able to rip people's heads off.
I can imagine Titan going to bed, waking up, and it's like right next to him.
One leg draped over and an arm over the ear. Just drooling on me.
Okay. So, unless anyone has anything else to say on policing, I wanted to cover something that we said before in the previous panel about the suburbs and how they're awful. I hopefully get Red Charlotte in here because she wants to talk about this too. But yeah, suburbs are awful. Let's just see quick temperature check. Maybe everyone agrees with me. You really should.
New subject.
Suburbs are awful, and we should probably bulldoze them and
Sorry,
rethink
what they
housing
call it. They're
policy in a
changing
more
on
sustainable
the
fashion.
on the floor.
Correct?
Why?
What's your
Why?
alternate
So wait,
solution
wait,
to
wait, wait, wait,
suburbs?
wait, wait, wait.
What do you
Anything
think of
else?
suburbs?
Hold
Like,
on. Can I just clarify something? You're trolling. Just you're like winking when you say bulldoze, right?
Oh, like I mean, we don't have to actually.
You don't
We don't-
actually mean bulldoze.
We don't. We can just abandon them, keep them like ghost towns. No, it's fine. I'm not gonna
Well, like
actually-
if people move out naturally, yeah, that's fine. They'll
Yeah.
become
We
ghost
don't
towns.
act. I
Okay,
mean,
cool.
I would like. Look, I would like an excuse to get in a fucking bulldozer. All right, fuck you. All right, trying to ruin my fun.
Sorry, fun police. Woo-hoo. Nope. Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, I'll raise my hand to that.
Make
Alright.
more malls.
I mean, I'd prefer
No,
to
just
live in the
convert
city.
the
but-
malls. You don't. You just convert the malls into public housing. Easy peasy. Public housing problem solved.
Yeah,
Malls.
dude. That way, yeah, that was that was ridiculous. But at least when I'm sleeping upstairs, I can go to GameStop.
Exactly. Haven't you always thought like where like a mall would be a fantastic
Thanks for
open
the follow,
living
Cape Cool 7.
space? And this is exactly where I want to spend most of my
Rock on
time.
Rock on
is the
Chicago.
mall.
Yeah,
Sports
like in
Champions.
Day of the Dead, like
Sports Buzz.
my
Okay.
rationality for that idea is he watched watched the movie Day of the Dead and was like, "Yo, living in a mall is amazing."
Right.
Do that.
Exactly. That's exactly it. What if I just mix malls with zombies? Oh my god, it's genius. It's
If I
fucking
could
genius.
have that pizza place in the mall with it, then I'm good, dude. Like they could, all the other places could be shut down. I just want that,
guys.
you know, that mall
Right,
pizza
like-
place. There's always
Prime
that one that's
Minister,
real
like,
good.
Our mall.
Prime, you're
To be I want to be on topic. So when you talk about gentrification, like basically, like sometimes it makes sense to Prime.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, sometimes it makes sense to have like a more diverse neighborhood, and in that case, you
Okay,
are
cool. I appreciate
displacing
different
like
ideologies. You're
certain
welcome to
people.
flesh
So
that
what
out.
happened
Join our
in
Discord too.
2011
You can throw links in there and stuff.
in the Netherlands was like basically because of the fact that my neighborhood is considered like a ghetto. They did what you said. They bulldozed some houses down, but they also make sure that those people got like better housing situations in place. So and those houses that got bulldozed down, basically like some rich area people, or well, not even rich, but like upper medium like level kind of housing was replaced by that poor housing. So in that sense, it makes sense to give those people that are being replaced like a better housing situation as well. So that being said, like if you're gonna just bulldoze like poor people's houses down, and then say like, oh, you're screwed now, lol, fuck you, like at that point, like it's like pretty ridiculous. And uh yeah, I don't know how they do that
So,
within the US,
Ryuji, if
but
you can mute
yeah.
yourself. Ryuji, mute yourself. We're getting like a lot of background noise from you. So if you can mute yourself, thank you. All right, so go ahead.
So I don't know how they do that within the US. So that's the issue.
Well,
So
friend,
if
either
they
way,
were
you're
to
welcome
say
to
like,
hang out here.
well,
So feel free
we're
to
just gonna
listen in, and
we're just gonna
know,
move
you
you
can
out,
always
and we're
tune
gonna
in. And
place you in another ghetto as well. At that point, it's like pretty ridiculous, right? So the problem is that like having like balanced like neighborhoods when it comes to housing is pretty actually like pretty good. It's pretty important, but it's the way you go about it, and I think that's the important issue right here. But I don't know how you feel about that, Prime, or anybody else.
I mean, I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about the bulldozing poor people's houses. I don't think that's what gentrification is. Gentrification is, people who inhabited a neighborhood getting priced out as the, socioeconomic status of the neighborhood increases. So I'm not exactly sure what topic.
Oh,
to be fair,
Yeah.
the article that I had shared previously was talking about like how in the past there literally was that kind of process where they like set fires. This is like a famous thing, but they used to set fires to neighborhoods to clear out like poor individuals, put in new ones, right?
Those
So
in
like they did
Brooklyn,
this
right?
to a Puerto Rican neighborhoods in Hoboken apparently.
That's right.
There were like 55 fires, and almost all of them were arson. And it was to clear them out for that. That's not what people mean today. To your point, Pan, that's not what people mean today. It's usually what we don't have to deal with. But like there can be literally violent confrontations to exit to move people from a neighborhood.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, that's good to know. I
apologize.
guess I didn't know that much about the history of arson when it came to gentrification.
Mhm.
I will say I'm not sure. I would like to see what solutions you guys have proposed, because I'm not exactly sure how you stop property values from increasing once the crime goes down and money moves in. I don't know what options
it's
are on the board.
artificial inflation, though.
I
Sorry.
wanted to talk about the suburbs. I did actually want to talk about
Oh, okay, sorry.
the suburbs thing, right? And so I said terrible things about the suburbs. I can explain what I mean about that. So the suburbs are an inefficient manner of housing individuals, right? Like we I think we know at least that much, that these people mostly, many of them, work in a city, so they're driving to a city for work and then driving back out to these individual houses, right? And that it's so sparsely so sparse in its density, right? So density is so low that like you have to drive to get anywhere. To do anything, you have to have a car, right? It's terrible for the environment, right? The amount of water, the amount of pollutants, the amount of I'm not sure about electricity. Electricity might be fine. But like there's just a whole series of issues with housing people in such a low density environment. And so you want to have more high density environment. Now I don't mean necessarily everyone has to live on top of each other. It's not the case, right? But the more low density, the bigger, the more difficult it is to have that community exist within the future. I think that a lot of progressives want, right? A greener future. It's actually much more difficult. And then there's also societal issue, right? There are a lot of social issues that came that sprung up when we started creating suburbs and moving out to them, right? But that's a separate issue.
Well, if your problems are mostly environmental, I don't see why it's intrinsic to like suburb. There's many things that we can do to make everything more green. Solar panels and stuff. More green forms of transport. So I'm not exactly sure why suburbs in particular, if like your main concern is environmental, yeah, sure, that's probably a problem. But I don't see why we don't just address the environmental problems it creates rather than saying, oh, suburbs are bad.
Paul, that's an easy ask.
Because the amount of it's like super easy to answer that. Okay, the bunny here. So the amount of resources that it costs to like develop a suburb and maintain it is significantly higher than that of like, any urban living. Okay, as well as the amount of development to have it is about twice the higher like government expenses than urban development. So
well, the government's not building these suburbs, are they?
I mean, they gave investment.
When it comes for like parks and recreation funding, fire department, policing in general, like waste management, transportation, libraries, busing
it's
and
good.
whatnot,
Just to accept one of my dab
roads in
counts.
general, and then like sidewalks as well as water and sewer systems.
give 'em
Yeah,
that.
it's
Well,
roughly
roads are
like-
paid for by like gas taxes, right? So people in suburbs are going to be paying disproportionate amounts of those because they have to drive very far. So if they're paying for the roads, like if they're probably paying higher property taxes because look at my dad, look at my dad, their value as long as they're still paying taxes on their property.
But that doesn't answer that also doesn't answer the question of how much energy it takes and how wasteful it is. That literally just ignores.
You can address that.
No, you can only slightly ameliorate it. There's no benefit to like suburbs. Like there's a very easy.
Sure, there is. People want
to. Okay, no, one time. So Titan finish, and then Pan can respond, and then we'll go to.
It's just a complete waste of resources in order to get to the end goal of people being significantly more isolated, not having the benefits of country living, and then you're just being massively wasteful with the amount of resources. Also, there's like a ton of health risks.
I do try to be kind of responsible with it.
In terms of like obesity, diabetes, blood pressure.
And I'm not as open when I'm on these panels because some of them don't have mature streams and it'll mess up their streams. So guys,
well, then I agree. Like I wouldn't want to live in the suburbs. However, there are people that do want to live in suburbs. So yeah, like it's not appealing to me, but I don't see why it's inherently bad. You say it's inefficient, but they're willing to put their money there. So I don't see a problem with that.
People only go to the suburbs, generally speaking. I have no idea if I'd be able to find data on this, but mostly it's just because suburbs are much more economically stable of environments. Like people that have the luxury of being able to move into the suburbs are not people that are like financially not secure. Like that's one of the easiest ways.
I mean, they'd be financially secure regardless of where they lived, if they can afford a suburb home. So I don't think that's the only reason why they live there is to keep themselves financially secure.
Well, I think it also go with that, like the indoctrination of like how it's like the quintessential American dream. Like ever since like back to the 1950s, like it's been like a super core ideal that you have your spouse and then your two kids. I mean, that's been another way that people have been noted into wanting to.
Some people live in decentralized cities.
Propaganda.
Some people live in decentralized cities that don't work that way. Like, I mean, I know a lot of places in the country where there isn't a main street. That's not like where everything centers. Like, and when your city doesn't center like that, because say it started out as a farming community, it's a lot different. There's a lot more of a radial effect with how housing works. It's not the same. So there are a lot of suburbs just by pure coincidence.
Yeah, like so. And you keep saying we can address it. But I don't see any addressing the suburbs and making it more efficient. I mean, like, what's your suggestion about making the suburbs more efficient? Because like one of the big problems with the suburbs is that you have a lot of people who live there who don't necessarily work there, like in their convenient places like Starbucks or their gas stations. Those people live even further out in like the boondocks of the suburbs. You know what I mean? And like it's just terribly inefficient. And so like I can't think of anything off the top of my head, and you're the one who's saying let's change it. So I would just like to hear maybe if you have a solution.
So I just want to put this out there real quick.
That was to
so
Pan,
talking about
problematic Pan.
I know, real quick, but like when it comes to efficiency, right? Like all of these things, we'll just stick to one. I heard like walkability, right? Like, and that leads to heart disease or whatever. But if your problem is with like the walkability and like the suburbs, then why aren't you complaining about the rural areas? Because the walkability is even worse out there. So like, I don't know how this is like intrinsic to just. The suburbs, right?
Yeah, but in rural areas they don't have the internet, so they have to go outside and stuff to have entertainment.
They still have the internet.
I'm just kidding. It was a joke. It was a meme.
Did they discover that? We need to take that away from them. Thanks for letting me know.
You're welcome.
But no, it's not. No, it's just no. Yeah, we're talking about low density living environments. So yeah, those are things. Well, actually, I'm not sure if. Well, I'll leave. I'm not sure if rural would actually have the exact same issues in suburbs. If you're talking about walkability, I'm not sure if rurals will have. In terms, you said heart disease, specifically brought up heart disease. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure they would have the exact same problems because the way they interact with their environment is a bit different than how we interact, especially since like, it's like with suburbs, like all you have like are like the roads to travel on, but with rural, like you can travel like through lots of different places, right? You can explore your environment better than suburbs where like the environment is quartered off into people's private property, you know? So it just, but I'm saying they're not quite exactly the same, but the issue is in low density populations, or low density areas, you have a lot of inefficiencies.
Yeah, when I completely agree with you. I think what at least the most realistic way to look at this, right, is like the suburbs are a product of something that's just going to happen naturally, right? Because everybody's not going to like live in the city or in the rural area. The suburbs like exist as a very natural phenomenon. So like what we can do is we can try and like address these particular issues and try and like mitigate some of the inefficiencies. But are you going to be able to like make it like just this super efficient like power machine? Of course not, because like these things exist like naturally.
No, it doesn't. Wait, the suburbs are entirely manufactured from the mid 1900s. What the fuck are you on about?
So like
it's all
people.
Suburbs are not a natural. No, they're not natural at all.
No,
it's talking about. They're so natural. They're like a snail.
It basically.
Haven't you ever seen a suburb? They're all exactly the same. I mean, they're all so natural.
It comes down to planning, right? It's basically like I don't know what branch of government or what like corporation does the planning within the US, but I remember like having like one of these American like neighborhoods like basically being like situated within my own city, so they planned that kind of shit, right? So they had a lot of issues, and they solved that kind of with like making extra like a bicycle tours or bicycle lanes between between those neighborhoods, because we ride a lot of bicycles. You guys don't. I get that, but like and that kind of stuff. But it's like it comes down to planning. So it's not like it's just natural. That's like
so
that's just ridiculous.
When I say it's natural, right, I'm saying like it's natural that they just exist. How we can do things like design them to be better. Like, like having bike lanes, like putting in a bunch of like solar panels and shit. Like we can make them more efficient just by design. But the fact that they just exist in general is a pretty natural phenomenon. Like this is. I mean, we had that happen back in the arcade and shit.
What do you mean? What do you mean by natural phenomenon? That's what people are getting caught up on.
So here's the thing, right? So like, anytime there's a large city, there's always people who exist outside the city that will commute into the city for work. So this fucking has existed in almost all of human history, right? So whenever there's a large like population center, not everybody lives in the population center.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who live outside of the population center.
Okay, so the suburban, but suburban sprawl as it stands in America is not like simply that. I see what you're saying, and it makes sense, right, to say that outside the city limits, you will necessarily have a more less dense housing, right? And that people will travel to inside the city because that's the economic center, economic engine, right?
Yeah.
No, that's sure. But suburban sprawl, the way it has formed in America, is different from just that. So there's suburbs, and I guess maybe let's just use the term exurbs for this because we don't want to get too confused. Because what exists just outside of the city limits is not exactly what I'm talking about.
Logistics.
I'm talking about like those large tracts,
army.
those identical, like the cul-de-sac type areas, right?
Sure.
We call those things suburbs too, but they're like farther out, and they are a very specific type of housing scheme that we just made up. That was not a thing before that we made up. Do you understand? Right? That's why. Titan pushed against you.
I mean, the reason they only came in the 1950s is because that's when cars were invented, and that's when it became possible, right? So what he's saying, natural, like, yeah, it came because once we had cars, you were able to live outside this, live in these areas outside the city, and since there's so much space, people decided to build these sorts of neighborhoods. And I don't see why people shouldn't be allowed to live in these neighborhoods.
Cars were broadly available for consumer purchase in the 20s.
Say that again? Sorry, you were quiet.
Cars were broadly available for consumer purchase in the 20s, not 50s.
Yeah,
So
but it takes time. Wait, it takes time. Well, first of all, the cars in the 20s weren't all that efficient, but it also takes time to for something to catch up to these particular innovations, right? So the fact that these things started really becoming popular in the 50s isn't also that surprising, right?
No, it's not surprising, but this is the thing that we're talking about. If you are going to design suburban neighborhoods in the future, you might want to do it different, right? You want to
absolutely
make it better. And this whole thing about this was just natural at the time, and therefore it was okay. Even that, you can still look at these neighborhoods and you can still say we need to have certain improvements, what I said, bike lanes. I don't know how effective they are within the US, but also maybe certain other aspects, having more sorry,
a bike lane.
Yeah, bike lanes don't make sense.
I'm 20 or 30 miles away from my
20 or
job,
30 miles.
Bike lanes.
We got a bike lane. Like what? That's ridiculous. No.
But this is the issue. This is the issue, right? It's basically sometimes they can be affected, but sometimes they are not.
Yeah,
you're basically saying that.
So, I mean, look, if riding your bike is super important to you, don't live in a suburb. There's lots of reasons not to live in a suburb.
Yeah, we're giving them to you. So the point.
But
there's also. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that, these are reasons why some individual might choose not to live in a suburb. But if someone decides, for whatever reason, that they still prefer the quality of life in a suburb, I don't see anything inherently wrong about that.
Here's the
suburbs
problem.
are cheaper than the city.
This is... Yeah, who cares though? That's that's whatever. We can actually change that. In terms of housing prices, we have the power to actually just change that. We can reform the system
zoning
if we wanted to. Yeah, there's all kinds of ways we could actually lower the price in the city. That is an issue. That's a fair issue. Still, what Titan was trying to say previously, I'm not sure if you're still there, but what Titan was saying was that there are inefficiencies built in with the system. Now you're saying if an individual wants to live there, then they should be able to, right? But we're not talking about the individuals. We don't give a shit about the individuals. No, we're talking about policy. We're talking about what is most effective policy housing scheme, right? For long-term growth and for conservation and for efficiency. And that is not
inefficiency
and will never be has not and will never be the suburbs.
But also
right?
to address this big thing called climate change and address one of the big causes of it, which is human involvement, and one of the big things that we do is build stuff, and that's one of the big things that releases all the shit into the atmosphere. So
well, I know a lot of the policies have revolved around building up, not out, but how much high density housing can we possibly have too? I understand the logic of that.
You ever heard of a space elevator?
We haven't built up though. We've been building out, not up. Now we're just starting to build up. For decades and decades, the policy of the United States has been to build out, not up. We're only literally just starting. We have not even come close to exploring the limits of our ingenuity and interesting housing schemes within a high density environment. Pan.
Well, that's because we have so much space. Like in America, we have
Mm-hmm.
so much room for population. We can afford to have some densely sprawl. Like if we had the same population density as Europe, I would agree with you that this is a much more pressing concern and that we definitely need to work on these. But there's just so much land in America. I don't see how these. I don't think we're running out of room for these low density areas.
We're not
And
saying
also,
that.
I don't understand is
None of the claims that
you guys aren't saying that. I never said you guys were saying that. But what I'm saying is that's kind of what it would take for me. And I don't understand why inefficiencies are bad if the ones being inefficient are paying the cost of being inefficient, right? Inefficiency is bad if, you know, the public has to pay a lot of these costs, but if the individuals are paying these costs, like if they're paying higher taxes for roads because they're driving more and consuming more gas, if they, you know, have all of this stuff, like I don't see why it's inherently bad. If people want to be inefficient and people are willing to pay the prices of being inefficient, I don't see anything wrong with them doing that.
So again, this is just ignoring the whole climate and the impact that it is, though, because your solutions so far have been bike lanes, which are just what and
But these youngins don't understand is
what?
build up, not out. Has
My
been a
solution is,
policy
like,
for
more
over 20
comprehensive
years. They've been
environmental
talking
policy.
about it for over
I'll
20
give you
years.
that.
Just in Gilbert, Arizona
but that
alone,
doesn't actually
it's
help
been a
address your
huge
issue.
push.
Okay,
So
like
it's
cities are
not
not like this
anything
massive
new.
fucking beacon of green
Whether or
living
not people
currently in the
listen,
United States.
I'm
Yet
just
there's
saying it's
already
been a
such large
movement for a
discrepancy.
long
You
time.
can only slightly curtail the issues that are inherent to suburbs. Okay, all these policies that you're including can just be done in
Tempe
urban
built up, not
development
out.
and just have much of a benefit in terms of being able to
kinda
curtail its carbon
ridiculous.
footprint. So
Probably more
there's no positive assertion that is exclusive to suburbs. I know Joe Lewis was in chat. He was talking about how they generally speaking have lower crime rates and they have better access to education. That's just because it follows income. Okay, we're just more generally wealthy people have the ability to move to the suburbs. It's not inherent to the suburbs. Okay, these things existed well before, but all the downsides of suburbs are intrinsic to them, and there seems to be no positive utility that's being extrapolated from it. None that are exclusive to suburbs.
There is. The people like living there and want to live there. That is a
Okay,
positive utility.
People
I can't say that's not a utility.
People have like.
So,
people
Pan.
have. We don't say people like having. Okay, like I swear to God, there are some people in Alabama that would love lynching gay people. Okay, that doesn't mean it's a good thing because you're like, well, what do you do
But
about them?
also,
Okay?
Pan is actually
we're-
missing a really key factor in why people move to the suburbs. The people are working oftentimes in the city, and so don't you think that they would rather, instead of commuting 2 hours each way to get to their job, maybe to their high-paying job, albeit maybe they're only spending 4 hours there, so that justifies why they can commute. You know, they're buying a house. That's what they're doing out in the suburbs. It's something they can't afford to do in the city. So that's why they're out there in the first place. If you gave somebody the option, now again, this wouldn't work in the market as it stands now. So I'm just saying, but just all things equal, if you gave them the option, would you rather live in the city or in the suburbs? Well, yeah, I'd rather live in the city. I just can't afford it.
Yeah, obviously.
Or I live in the suburbs, but that's like you're saying they
100,
want to live in the
100.
suburbs. I'm saying no, they don't want to live in the suburbs.
Because they want to own a home.
No, I'm saying, but you can want to own a home and then also be like, well, fuck, but I can't own a home where I want. So, but I'm going to settle because I believe that I should have a home because I'm going to pass it on to my kids because I'm going to have kids or some shit like that. I have a dog, whatever the fuck, you know. I don't know. Well, I would never move to the fucking suburbs, but then again, I'm never going to be able to afford a home in the city. So I'm going to be renting for life. I mean, that's the mark I bear, but like, do you understand though what we're trying to?
What Victoria?
Yeah, I don't actually. I don't, because that seems like a perfectly rational personal decision that they would be making, or that you would be making not to.
Okay, but when you said, I would like to move to the suburbs. No, really, what they want to do is own a house. Do you understand the difference?
Yes, I do. But if they can't afford to own a house in the city and they can afford to own a house in the suburbs, then that means they do want to live in the suburbs. Obviously, it's not optimal. Obviously, everyone would prefer to have a mansion right next to the fucking town
it's
center.
not what they want to.
So don't you think that like
you're
so
talking about
these are the
done out of
solutions?
necessity, not something that's being done out of want.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, of course, but that's like pretty much everything. Yeah.
Wait,
no,
If they change people's ability, then
So,
heck yeah,
hold on.
I would.
So
I'm all for it. Let's get rid of suburbs. Screw it. Like, let's all move to the city. That's great.
I'll say to Pan's point that it absolutely is the case that some people do actually want to live in the suburb, like in that environment.
Yeah.
They grew up in that environment and then they want to go back to that environment. Like there's some people do. I don't understand them, but they exist, right?
Vertical farming and shit, man. I'm with it.
Yeah, I
Lab
just
meat.
got that.
Let's do this shit.
Phalanx want to say something, and then
Oh, if I could go after.
Victoria, do you?
I was just
Okay.
gonna pass it to Victoria, and then I'll take my turn after.
No, as somebody who's grew up in the city, I grew up in fucking East LA. I grew up in like the city. Like, and I ended up moving out to a more suburby area as I like had the ability to. But like, here's the thing, growing up in the city, I can understand the like perks of it because I could walk down the street and I could get to a Jack in the Box. I literally lived right behind a grocery store. I could go across the street to a pharmacy. Like, I understand having everything in close proximity is fantastic, but when you go out to like a suburb, there have also been studies to show that living outside of a city, outside of like a deep, big city, has a lot of mental health benefits to it as well. Like, you just feel better because if you're in a city and you're on top of each other and you don't have that personal space, that private space, whatever, you're sharing a fucking wall with somebody, you hear every step your upstairs neighbors takes, you hear the dog barking downstairs all the time, whatever. Like, but that's just the reality of cities, is that you want to say, oh, you're not living on top of each other, but you are. I lived in track housing and you share a wall. That's how it is. Yeah, you're not on top of each other, but you're still on top of each other.
I love hearing my neighbors.
Oh my
Like,
god!
we heard our
fucking
neighbors having
liar.
sex. We
You're
heard our neighbors
such a
having sex.
fucking
No, it was
liar.
fucking hilarious. What are you talking about? Me and my fucking
No.
girlfriend were at our window, just listening. Like, it was fucking great.
No,
It's
here's the
that
thing.
voyeuristic?
It's funny once in a while. It's funny once in a while, but that shit every
So,
night when you get to hear the moaning, yelling, oh,
So
yeah, no,
Victoria,
it's annoying.
what's happening here is you're mischaracterizing the variety of housing options within a city, right? There's a lot more than freaking an apartment, right? Like, yes, an apartment, you have to do
track housing.
No. But first of all, what you first described was an apartment, right?
Right,
And
which I've lived in.
Great, yes, 100%. And the problem is there, right? Yeah, sure. And no one's denying that living in a different environment will have different benefits, right? What you guys are doing, what you all are trapped on, are on the individuals. Titan and I, we're talking about the society in general and the best way to organize it. And the most efficient way to organize it, the most green way to organize it. We're not talking about individual people's preferences.
But besides
that, even within a city, like I'm saying, since there's many housing options, right? Not just row homes or tract homes or whatever you'd like to call them, right? Not just those. There are many different housing schemes that are available and that we can create. And then there's more that we haven't even thought of, right? There's more ways within, and it even doesn't have to be in the city proper, just a high density space, right? Like a high density space, at least higher density than suburbs. We can create more of these different environments that can have all kinds of benefits, maybe benefits that we currently don't have with our existing policy, and go from there. So go ahead, Victoria, please.
No, but I was gonna say that I don't understand where you're getting that, like, a city is super like green or the city is super like convenient or easy, because like there are definitely some cities, like, here's the thing, like if you go to Chicago, the train connects to everything, but that's because the train was built for the city it was in. You can hop on the train and you can go to the a Cubs game or whatever. You can hop on the train and wind up at like the major destinations you may want to or need to go. But if you're in LA, it's super fucking inconvenient because the train wasn't built for the city. The city was just kind of built around the train system. It doesn't really have a convenient area to go. Like, as I grew up here, I would have to, like, before I got a car, I would have to take 2 different buses and a train to get to my job, which would take over 2 hours. And then I get a car and it takes me 30 minutes to drive.
What's the point that you're like broadly making here? It sounds like
The point that I'm
making an argument in our favor, actually.
Yeah, it just sounds like you're just trying to say LA infrastructure sucks, which I don't think anybody.
And it's here's the thing, but it's
Great.
also a major city that you guys are advocating for. There are tons of big cities out there that aren't
Hold
really.
on. So like we can say that there's tons of big cities, but do you know the cities that encompass your metro area?
What do you mean? Like,
What are the cities that encompass your metro area? You said you live in Los Angeles, right? Where are the other two within your MSA defined?
like the cities or
Long
the,
Beach,
like
Anaheim is the answer to that question. Like one of the problems with this conversation is that we have there's so many problems, right? The first thing, and maybe I'm saving you from Fanatic because he's gonna come hard on the paint here. So I'm just like,
yeah.
I'm just like, so like my problem is that what we know as cities, what we know as suburbs, is not very clearly defined. I've always argued that there's sort of three metrics that we should look into to determine if something is a city, a rural area, or a suburb. And essentially, it's three things. It's the miles that you have to go to work, the number of single-family homes within the area, and then also the ownership of those homes. Now, if that's above the metro average, congratulations, you have a suburb. If that's under the metropolitan average, then congratulations, you have a city. But what we're finding is that a lot of areas in the United States don't fit cleanly in the above the metro average and below the metro average. Some parts of the country have a very high percentage of single family homes, but not a lot of home ownership of those single family homes. Some areas have very low mileage to get to work, and other areas don't have low mileage to get to work. So like every area is going to be different. I think that we need to change not only the categories of what we define as rural, suburb, and city, but also expand what we can build within these areas once we clearly define them as rural, city, and suburb. Because one of the reasons why people bitch about the suburbs is that we understand that like we shouldn't just build R1 housing, which is residential, and one is the lowest population density of housing across an entire area. People want different types of variety, but unfortunately, due to zoning laws and land use laws, it's very difficult for not only builders but communities to reimagine what their community even looks like because of zoning restrictions in the area that are still in place. But also, I strongly believe that a lot of people don't know anything about fucking housing. So,
sure,
a lot of that shit probably went over heads. So,
no, no. We'll see. We'll find out. Go ahead, Chinchilla.
Yeah, so I was basically like in lower government for quite a while, so for 4 years. So I was elected. So I know a bit about housing, and basically what we're talking about like is basically you can still have like this intimacy and still have like high density like housing. $100 billion presented to you guys, right? Because I'm talking to Americans, right? It's like basically you know like the New York City where they have like these 2 or 3-story building housing, and then
row housing,
in
yes,
a row, in a row, like that kind of stuff. Like that can be like pretty intimate if you have like good isolation, and that's
it's also
high density housing, and that's perfectly fine. And compared to like saying like you need to have like the lawn and the picket fence and all that kind of stuff, that's not necessarily needed in that case. So
but you do recognize though at the same time that the use of the land and what is even like allowed to be built there can be very restrictive. And even if you believe that you want to add row houses into your community alongside R1 housing, then there's still going to be like pitfalls and types of drawbacks just from the legislative level. Like it doesn't matter how well your city's owner with his multiple master's degrees in city planning goes in there and tries to advocate for row housing. If their township council or city council says, well, we like lights and we don't want to build row houses here, and it's like, well, I guess I'm fucked, because even of my arguments of saying that like we should probably diversify housing, and even in the zoning committees that show like the evidence proves that we can do this and we have the land use to do this and we're doing nothing with it, they'll just be more than happy to build warehouses and Amazon before they want to build like row houses in a community.
That's basically talking about incentives. So you're talking about like incentives, why people want to do like certain things, and like honestly, like I agree with that. That's messed up. So yeah, we're on the same page, Joe.
I have nothing I disagree with on that.
Let's give Fanatic a try. Hey, Fanatic, love that you're back.
Hey.
Yeah, I don't know. It just I'm not even gonna go hard in the paint. I'm pretty chill actually today. I just don't understand. Okay, maybe a little bit. No, but I don't actually plan on it. I really don't plan on it. Legitimately, I just don't understand. Like for me, it's like, oh god, I feel like it's like the leftist wet dream to just go ahead and kind of like start focusing on like these really broad things, all this amazing stuff, for no reason, instead of like actually dealing with the core issues at hand, right? Because I mean, with any system like this, you're going to run into different problems one way or the other, right? So, in like like in like rural areas, you're going to have an entirely different experience than a suburb than an urban place, right? So, like they're all going to come with their own problems, but we recognize right now, I think it's like 52% of Americans live in freaking suburbs, 52% of Americans. So now you're saying that we need to upend the lives of 52% of Americans in order so that we can get our suburban dream, when we know that the vast majority of people, the dream is to get out of the suburbs and live into the, I mean, to get out of the urban areas and move into the suburbs. Why? Because in these areas, like, you know, you have a lot more space. The cost of living is typically a lot cheaper. You know, sure, like you might miss, you know, some things, like, yeah, you need a car to live in most suburbs and things like that. But like, most people are willing to sacrifice that for the lower crime rates, for the lower portions of drugs being a part of your community. There's just, again, much more issues that some people want to avoid. So instead of us getting stuck in this trap of like talking about, oh, I really hate this thing that is like pretty much the fabric of the country, how about let's talk about just actual decent reform? Like, I don't know, more federal housing in urban areas that's not in the form of projects, but in single
or in
family
the form of assisting living facilities, which also count as affordable housing.
Which sounds crazy to me. Exactly. Like let's get rid of those things and try to move in a more like in a direction that most Americans want. Let's do more
So
affordable.
no, but this isn't about. Okay, so here we go. Fanatic. We're gonna try to keep this in calm voices. We'll see how long that lasts. But Fanatic buddy, this isn't about like what individuals want, because what individuals want can be changed by policy. You admit this, right? Like that governmental policy can change the wants and desires of the populace, right? Like can change their imagination for what they want in their own lives, because of the options that are provided. Correct?
Well, that's so extremely vague. It's impossible to
No,
disagree
okay.
with.
Hold on. No, then I'll make it more specific, right?
Thank you.
Talking about the suburbs, right? When the suburbs happened, we had a policy, right, housing policy that encouraged families to move out there, right, to flee the cities, right? And there were a lot of reasons behind that, right? Some of them racial, right? As to why people left, abandoned those cities, right? So, but like this idea, this dream of the suburb, right? It wasn't just simply providing loans, right? There was a whole marketing campaign behind it, right? Letting people know that you can be, giving them an idea, you can be the king of your own land. Well, sorry, 1 second. Zonia dead. Thank you. Sorry, I just got to pause here. Thank you for being so kind as to give 10 hot 2 gifts to the channel. That's awfully kind of you. Helps us a lot. This is how we pay for it. Guys, help us out. Thank you, Zonia, for the kindness. If you have not done so yet, sub to the channel. We'll get back to this in a second. I promise. Sub to the channel. You haven't done so yet. Gift bits or gift subs. It's September. You get 20% off. Zonia dead. I just found that out. Okay. All right, Zonia. I understood it. All right. She's a zombie now. You get 20% off new subs and gifted subs. Help out the channel. Thank you, Zonia, for like that very, very kind donation to this community. You help keeping alive. Very much appreciated. We can even start us a hype train. If 200 more individuals jump on in. But thank you so much, Zonia. Got to point it out. All right. Back to our friend. I was saying that yes, the suburbs were imagined, right? And it's like the populace who previously had not cared about something like this, all of a sudden did care, right? And not that not that benefits offered by suburbs were completely imaginary, but like they literally, like the fact that the American dream, it was sold. The American dream was literally sold to us, right, through this campaign. So that's what I'm saying, right?
But hold on, I want to point out to you that it's really hard to sell somebody on something that doesn't naturally cater towards their needs. It was something that was somewhat foreign to some people, and so like the idea of it was like something like, I don't know. A lot of us are really comfortable and used to city living, but the second they get this opportunity, now they've lived it, and now that we've done it, right now that people have this experience, sometimes vicariously through others, or through other family members and things like that,
or
the
TV.
concept. Right, or TV, or whatever means, they recognize all of these benefits because living in a city does come with numerous amounts of problems that most people would want to get rid of. Most people would like to avoid these things. So now we have this like healthy alternative, which is suburb living. So it's like I don't know, like. Now that the cat's out of the bag, like, man, this is some real superior freaking living. The idea of trying to convince people to go back is crazy as freak.
Okay.
Like, for most people want to live in the suburbs.
We can design housing policy. One second. We have level 2 hype train, 75% done, 25% left. Can we get to level 3 hype train? How about the channel? Sub to the channel. We give you so many benefits. We give you all this content. We give you emotes. Thanks so much for emotes in chat. For all the emotes that we get, that you get, when you sub to this community, you get ad free viewing. We've been playing ads during Open Walk on Planet. Want to avoid those ads? Then be so kind as to sub, right? And you can gift bits. If you've been gifted a sub, continue your sub. If you have a resub, use your resub. If you can donate subs, remember 20% off on September. Thank you, Fame TV, for subbing yourself with Prime Gaming. That's another option. If you have a Prime Gaming, you can use that on this channel, and you'll be subbing for free. That's like the best option. You have that, just use that, right? One free sub per month. Help out this channel. This is how we keep it alive through kindness for people like you. So, and gifting bits like Stardust did. Thank you, Stardust, for that kindness. At 78%. Can we get to a level 3 hype train? Help us out. We need a few more heroes in chat to make it happen. Okay. Yeah, I'm saying that we could literally, if we wanted to, design policy that would encourage individuals to come back. So I'm not saying that we Gestapo it would be fun, but like Gestapo knock down doors, right, and drag people out of their homes, and like you will live in a urban area, right? We're not going to do it, right? We're talking about the same way that we got people in the suburbs, we can get them out of the suburbs. No, but the point is, we're talking. But how we did that is through policy, and we're talking about like what is the most efficient way to organize society, especially in a climate sustainable way.
Right. So the problem that I'm saying is that the policies that we did were crafted around people's desires. They wanted to be in these suburbs. This is what they wanted, and we just sold them on the thing that they already wanted. I mean, hell, what is it? What is it? The easiest way to get someone to do something is to make them want to do it, right? Like, and so like I think it's like, man, yes, people wanted to do this, but like this was something that already catered to their desires. So like now you're saying, well, we got them what they wanted. Now we can come up with policy that'll discourage them from the thing that they actually want, such that we can get them, such that we can like reverse this thing that we did, where we completely cater to their wants. It's like giving a kid, like saying, hey, we're going to come up with a policy in this house. You no longer have to eat any vegetables. You can just have candy as much as you freaking want to. And the kid's like, oh yeah, this is great. Or you know what? Here, we'll create a policy that allows you to sleep whenever you want. Your bedtime doesn't exist anymore. And it's like, well, we can really come up with policy that, really encourages kids to go to bed at an earlier time. And it's like, yeah, no, that's a fat sell. This is a different thing. Now we're trying to get people to go away from what the intrinsic desires of every American, which is going to be, their own ownership typically, which is going to be their own independent land, their own, like you said, king of their own castle. Yeah, those are all the things that's so easy. I mean, it's really easy to sell people on that. It all caters to your own wants and your own desires. You're going to have a harder time trying to reverse that now. And it sounds foolish to me.
We have less than 30 seconds on the clock. If you help us out with that hype train, it'd be great. If we have any more heroes in chat who could save that hype train. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Fanatic. But this is work. This is how we pay for all of this. So hop out the channel. This is how we keep this sustainable. Sub, donate bits, or donate subs, or continue subs, and do that. Looks like we're not going to make it this time, unfortunately. But I think those who are kind enough to donate. All right.
I think Fanatic is like, what? One of the things that I think is important to understand is that even if we want to change and reimagine what the suburbs look like, this isn't going to be something that I would argue we're going to see in our lifetime. I think this is something that we'll probably see in our children's lifetime, where just and that we might even see just like the lower like sort of bubblings of that, where reimagining like how zoning and land use works is going to be something that's very important. Like even something as simple as saying that changing certain lots that have a history of low ownership, turning that from R1 to R2, that can be a very easy way of just saying, hey, instead of like this one lot of property that we cannot sell or has a history of like constantly having like long-term vacancies, let's change that from like the R1 requirement to the R2 requirement.
Can you explain that?
Way, yeah, so population density and the way that housing works is that you have like R1, which is it's intended for like the detached family home, like what we know is like the suburbs. R2 is intended for areas that have a maximum of two like what they call like dwelling units within a property. So that's like having two houses on the same plot of land for use. So if you have something that is difficult to sell as one because of the cost of that, one way that you can divvy up the cost and make it cheaper and have incentives for people moving in there is changing it to a double dwelling property. An example of that looks like for some like properties that some planners I've spoken to argue are really good places are corner homes that have a incredibly high amount of land, but like a really like disproportionate land to property ratio, where you're paying a significant amount more on the land itself than the actual property. And those units tend to be hard to sell for certain individuals in certain areas. And like one thing that I've seen some planners advocate for is changing that from R1 to R2, building two sort of like dual properties there, and then like having like a connecting driveway that connects the two. And then sometimes it's a lot more alluring for certain realtors, because then you can kind of like turn that into like a leasing situation where you're kind of leasing essentially, instead of having like two homes or like essentially two homes, like floor 1, floor 2 that you're leasing, you can have a situation where you're leasing 4 properties in the exact same lot. There's a lot of benefits from that, just from the bumping of like the lowest density to the second level. And then there's other like things like multiple residential. There's one that's called like B1, if I remember correct. There's a bunch of different like zoning or unit zonings.
Okay.
Districts, excuse me.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in and make sure everyone has a chance to be a part of this conversation?
And I would also like to remind chat that the tyranny is now. I'm just kidding.
Captain A. Jones is our newest brand spanking mod. Thank you, Captain A. Jones, for that. Very much appreciate you being here. Okay.
Of course. Thank you.
Absolutely. Right. And we won't let you guys fucking forget it, I'm sure. So, all right. But back to it. And what we were discussing. So someone left. Okay, 2 people left. Okay, I don't know. I was getting very confused. All right. Yeah. So, well, Joe, I want to know exactly what you think about this. Do you do you agree that it's what I'm thinking in my head when I think of suburbs? Because you're right, and we already run into this in this conversation, talking about like what exactly counts as suburban. Right? What are we just like? What exactly we're talking? I basically was saying cul-de-sac suburbs, right? That's a very specific housing model, and very American housing model that we created, and which is as inefficient as can be, right? Someone brought up that I think it was Pan. Brought up that people, or maybe Phalanx, that people will naturally be outside of a city, like emigrate to outside of a city to slightly lesser dense housing and then drive into it. And that's the thing that does happen. But those cul-de-sac type schemes, those were not like a natural outgrowth. They were in fact created specifically by government policy, right? So like that's what I'm trying to discuss, and saying that like those things are damaging to the environment, all around inefficient, and there's all kinds of other societal issues that come along with this as well.
And
but
then
would you
there's
agree with that?
also, yeah, there's also certain challenges too. One of which being that it's very easy in certain areas to sort of segregate based on cost. So we won't like, as we've seen in practice, in especially when basically we said, hey, segregation bad, we have to like resegregate our community, or actually desegregate our communities. And then the housing boom of R1 was happening at the exact, or the idea of selling the suburbs was happening at the exact same time. So it's like, okay, we can't exclude the blacks legally, but there's got to be another way, right? So they did it with housing. And then what happens is, like, when communities like understand this and try to do certain solutions, they tend to be incredibly insufficient. Like adding more affordable housing into areas so that people can actually participate in the benefits of living in a suburb, which might not necessarily meet the costs of living there. But a lot of times what people think that looks like is like not row housing, excuse me. What the fuck is it called? Like apartment style buildings and those sort of HUD style. I'm thinking like Newark 1970, of just like a brick establishment of just like floor to floor to floor to floor to floor of houses. But that's not even what would even be allowed to be built if they were to build affordable housing in the first place. This is why I think a lot of communities what's the word? How do I word this in the nicest way possible? They skirt the requirements for housing by building affordable homes for the elderly. And despite the fact that maybe their community doesn't have the numbers to serve the elderly that could house in there within the community, but there are plenty of other individuals outside of this area that will fill these homes and fulfill the affordable housing requirement. And then they go, see, we did it good. And it's like, well, yes, it's great that you house elderly folks, but if we're saying that there's still segregation based on cost, and then you look at those who end up in these suburbs, in these elder assisted care facilities, it's still majority white. It's like, we're just changing it so we can virtue single for old people? And that sounds a little yikes. And I'm gonna yield that. But I think that broadly speaking, I agree with you. Like, I just want to see a reimagination of what suburbs look like, but I also think it needs to be much more clearly defined in 2021 and onward. That was a word salad. I'm so sorry.
No problem. Let's go to Dan.
Great. I'm glad to be back from recovering from Prime's cold. That really hit me pretty hard. And I do also want to mention that there was a large amount of banks that were complicit to much of the redlining policies and through much of the neighborhoods that along with suburbs that would cause many families who are African American predominantly ends up getting refused a home loan for even like getting like a place, even though they completely qualify for it. A lot of it is complacency through effort through the government, the Federal Housing Agency, I believe, and different mayors and governors who were part of their projects to segregate the blacks back in the old days, as we can remember. And a lot of this affects to us now, and I would assume many people here would agree that it directly attributes to the systemic racism that's going along today. And a lot of that will conclude I kind of would agree with Prime that suburbs are pretty terrible, but to the exchange of the costs and poverty and all of that, including the travel time from getting to your work and whatnot, I don't see it to be a success story at all.
So I think what Fanatic would say, or maybe what Pam would say, in response to that.
Wait, really quick. Can I really hate the framing of one thing, and it seems like this is always the conversation because it really does skirt one of the major issues here. Is whenever we start talking about redlining, it seems like we're always willing to say the banks did something really, really terrible, right? But in reality, it wasn't just the banks. It was that thing that I brought up earlier, which I think I still have open here.
The mayors, the planning commissions,
and the
city councils and township councils. Yeah, sorry.
No, But you're fine. But the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which was created by the government, which literally was the ones that designed the redlining, that was something done by the federal government. When the federal government, through FDR's New Deal, was like literally saying, "Hey, we're about to have a problem because a lot of you aren't able to." I wish I had the quote where he literally said, foreclosures are happening to too many Americans, because of the way the loans were structured at that point, where they had the balloon payment at the end, and then they said, "Hey, wait a minute, people can't afford that, and that's making banks come back and take their loans. So what we'll do is we'll do new loans instead." Through the federal government, we'll decide how we'll end up, who will give
That
the
would
loans
be
and all that
those
stuff. They
FHA
created the loan
loans.
commission, or the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and then through that's where the redlining started. It wasn't banks. It was that the federal, the Homeowners Loan Corporation created these things, and then the banks were only allowed to give loans to these specific people that were in desirable or undesirable areas, which the government decided on.
I was alluding to that. I was definitely alluding to that, Fanatic.
I got you. Just want to make sure that it's very clearly framed and stated that it wasn't the banks acting on their own. It was the government that did so.
Yeah, it was government policy. Exactly.
Yeah, and at the same time too, which I guess is also like I mentioned too, is that it turns into this level of just like cross communication with all these facilities and municipalities at the same time with these structures. So then what happens is when you try to like deal with the problem, you start running into like all these other sort of roads and hiccups and bumps where like your community might do something like, we're going to reimagine what R1 zoning is, and we're going to change the requirements of the land use of our areas. And then you just get a bunch of corporate bankers coming in, and then you find out like, oh shit, they own all of our homes in our area. And then it's like, and then they say like, well, you can buy them if you want. And it's like, what?
So that's what's happening in California. Like right now, all of our real estate is going up in such insane ways, but it's not going up with consumers. It's going up with banks. So banks are right now like outbidding pretty much all the consumers on these houses. So now the pricing is just getting completely out of whack. And so then now people can't buy houses, which is like really increasing the demand. And then, but then no one's going to pay for them at the rate that the bank is trying to sell them. So now, like, obviously you got people who are just becoming more homeless. It's becoming a humongous problem in our state, like in general. And then on top of that, now people aren't able to buy houses at an affordable rate.
That even happened to my home when I was evicted. The reason why as I found out the reason why my eviction was so quick is because banks got, and this is really fucked up in Jersey, banks got priority in seeing what houses in certain areas end up within HUD housing. So while my house was categorically a HUD home, it was a home that was in a very popular suburb. It was very high, not only a high cost of living, but good schools, like things that are essentially like the quintessential things that you want in your community. So the bank basically bought that before it even made it to the auction. So while like what should happen in certain auctions in New Jersey for houses, if you're trying to like potentially purchase a HUD home or something like that, you can go to a certain auction and there's certain houses, they all have different like developmental problems with them, for instance, but usually like people can do that like, oh, I just want like a fixer upper, like I have the ability to pay for these things and I'll like use my money out of pockets, like even though I'm getting it at a low price, like I'm still going to get hit with the cost of like revamping things. And then banks will be like, well, we'll buy it at your price and you don't even need to worry about like, we'll just take care of it all in house. So they'll like buy the house, do all the repairs, put it back on the market, and then like just get insane profits on that. And that's a practice I am 100% against. Like I don't think banks should be allowed to even participate in the auctions off of evicted homes. Like unless it's like unless there's like nothing like that, to me is the last resort where like if no one is able to purchase this home in this area and this area is staying at a long time, then maybe you can give it to the bank and they can figure something out there. But it's really crazy to like just to talk to the current owner of my old home and say that like, yeah, when we went to the when we went to the auction for it, like we already had a deal with the bank, so we just showed up there and just did a hand wave to show to our lawyer that we were there, and the house was like said and done. Like we had to do anything. And I was like, oh, that's fucking cool, I guess.
Yeah. Oh man, that especially after the recession, Holy shit! The fire sale in the houses. Okay, yeah, that was crazy. Like when you dig into that gets even worse. The more you find out, what happened after that. But I don't want to get too far away from our original point. Shit. Oh, I was trying to have an olive branch. Well, not an olive branch, but cause fuck them. But I was trying to be nice to Pan and Fanatic. So I was so Dan brought up the amount of time it takes to travel, right? But I think Fanatic and Pan would agree, and you guys let me know if I'm wrong here, that a person who has bought a suburban house, right? That individual has already factored this in, right? And decided that this is a cost worth bearing, right? There's any option that we describe here, there's going to be a cost, right? In a more urbanized environment, that's going to be space, right? In a suburban environment, that's going to be access to like city infrastructure, right? All those things are costs that each individual will going to have to decide to bear. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. So simply saying that I don't think is enough. This is why I'm trying to not focus this on an individual's desires, because an individual can desire, as Fanatic has very eloquently stated, to be in suburban housing, and there are plenty of times it makes sense for that individual, right? But to what Dan was saying, that I think what you were trying to get at is that on a policy level, right, on a societal level, they have been disastrous for a number of reasons. And that's where I'm trying to work out. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I add a little bit to it? Like, think of like a lot of the other issues that also add on to it. Global warming, for example. The amount of time for a person who lives like 30 minutes away in a suburban house in the middle of nowhere has to travel 30 minutes to an hour to work every day. Like 1 hour there, 1 hour back, and think of the amount of gas in use every time getting to work. A lot of that, to what I think is very much inefficient and also cause a lot of pollution to the environment. To then, a lot of I've seen from what other cities and what they have done, including my state, is train systems they put into it, even if they're good or bad or whatnot. We can disagree on that. However, that whole point was to save the costs to the environment of gas, gasoline, and all of that, and to then how well people travel within like to another city and within the time given within a certain amount of money. And I think that's a better, efficient way. But still it's like governmental policy and whatnot. They might not really put that much care into it. So I would like to hear what everyone else's thought on that.
Respond?
I don't know. Go ahead. Yes, that's you. Go ahead.
Sardis?
Oh, are you sure?
Are you sure? I don't know. Do you want to add something there to what Dan said?
No. Well.
You want to meme? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Look, get it out of your system.
Bring child labor back. Is that what you're trying to say?
Get it out of your system.
No. Okay, so I think bulldozing the suburbs are a false flag narrative pushed by Big Tractor. And I'm a little sick of it, honestly. I'm a little sick of it. I don't, I'm not okay with that, okay? Big Tractor is funding all of us to go bulldoze the suburbs. And I'm not lining their pockets with any more money, okay? So I mean, that's what you guys want to do.
So you're saying Caterpillar stock is up? So you're saying that Caterpillar Incorporated is the big business that is causing all these issues in the first place, instead of like government incompetence and
oh yeah, it was planted by them the entire time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was a weird meme.
Okay.
I mean, it does actually. I mean, it also kind of falls apart when even like tractor owners of John Deere don't even own their tractors, because the very computers that operate their tractors are still owned by John Deere, and then they can turn those off at any point.
Tractor drivers are not Big Tractor. Tractor drivers are not Big Tractor.
Right, but I'm saying that like the very companies that own the computers that are in the tractors aren't even owned by the people who are operating the tractors in the first
Right,
place.
that's big tractor though. The
Interesting.
companies that own the tractors. It wouldn't be the drivers. They're just victims of the same thing. So I mean,
Isn't that why they're getting the right to repair now?
I don't know.
Those are just iPhone users. We don't really care about those people.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to point
That's all
out
I
that,
had.
like, got you. So
We'll go to Fanatic, and then after that, we'll try. Is it Jay or Jake? Yeah, we'll try him. Go ahead, Fanatic.
Yeah, so I wanted to just point out like that, like beyond just people's like desires, right? The educational opportunities are significantly better in like suburbs, right? So like, there's so many problems. Like health, people are healthier in general in the suburbs. Now that's not the same as rural. Now I know that someone earlier was mentioning that people are less healthy in the suburbs, but that was in a totally different country. That was in the UK. In the UK, it does seem like there's this reverse thing. The same studies that they did in the UK, they found that those discrepancies continue to persist for people living in cities versus living in rural areas. But suburbs are not rural areas. Rural areas, yeah, they're doing worse. Suburbs tend to be doing better, right? So people are able to generate more wealth typically living in the suburbs, right? Because then most of the time, home ownership is going to be significantly higher, and wealth. 70% of wealth of wealth portfolios in this country are real estate. So the ability to own homes for those individuals tends to be better off for them long term. People living in both urban areas and rural areas have worse outlooks on their financial futures. So like I just think in pretty much so many different ways, we have all of the evidence that pretty much leads towards the idea that living in the suburbs is just superior. So it's crazy to me like that we'd be talking about just completely doing away with suburbs. Now, should we be doing things like coming up with better infrastructure ideas for improving the lives of people in cities? I'm with that. We can have productive conversations about those kind of things. I don't know why we have to go to the extreme. It seems like this is always the case with leftists. We go to the extreme of just get rid of the suburbs, get rid of policing, and it's always something crazy, like just throw away some sort of system, which we see has all these beneficial effects, instead of let's just find realistic ways of improving some of the poor conditions that we have.
I'd say the same extends to housing as well in urban areas too, right? I mean, it's not. I'm saying this like you would disagree with this, where it's like, yeah, I think at the same time we should also recognize that within different types of areas, like rural areas, urban areas, and suburban, we're not going to be able to equally apply the same type of benefits that a suburban area might have versus an urban. Like the good example is schools, where people always talk about like school choice. And it's really ironic coming from these suburban areas saying they want school choice, just because they want to just learn a little bit more about Black people. But it's like, okay, I want to take my child out of the area because these schools are failing, and it's like, okay, well that school is still going to be failing when you pull your child out of it. So maybe something is happening that within the infrastructure and design that we have for schoolings isn't working. And one thing that happens a lot is cost, and how like home ownership is directly connected to your quality of schools. And then even when you say that, like you get people who go like, what? So that means we're just gonna give cities money to improve their schools? It's like, yeah. Like,
yes.
Like I think that like if we find, and this is again, like there's so much to this, but like if we can find an amount that is shown to give, like, and that's like the amount that's enough to like make sure that you have proper HVAC, proper teachers, administrators, and what have you, and then certain schools in whether that be rural areas or urban areas that are having like shortcomings there, I think the state and the federal government should make a dedicated effort to fund the difference. Like there are areas in Texas where kids are taking 45-minute bus rides to school. And it's like, that's a different problem than your school not having clean water, air conditioning, as some schools literally this week are going to be opening without those things.
Yeah, can I respond?
Respond, and then I want to go to Jake.
Like I understand that much of your points is speaking directly the truth, so I'm trusting where you're coming from, Fanatic. I'm just a bit confused on saying specifically that children are much healthier in suburbs. Understandably, I'm more of the question of like the longer time to get to a hospital from like a suburb compared to like an inner city might be a big difference between saving a life.
Right.
Will be.
Okay.
Even in rural areas, yeah, that's a huge issue. There's like
Yeah.
the scarcity of doctors, scarcity of medical workers.
Yeah, that was like I was a bit confused on that, but can you explain?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. That's a really specific thing, and I guess I don't have the numbers on that. But I would just
Yeah.
imagine for myself that even people living within cities, not everybody is directly really close to a hospital. And I would imagine in a place like New York, the time it takes to get to a hospital from certain areas is going to be longer than the time it takes to get to a hospital from like some of the suburban areas, right? Like it just depends. So, like for example, where I live, I mean, the hospital is like less than 15 minutes, less than 10 minutes away from me, I want to say. But I know in places I've lived when I used to live in the city where it would take me a lot longer to get to the hospital because of traffic and all of the other complications, unless it was at nighttime, because at nighttime it seemed like, yeah, you were good to go. So yeah, I don't know that those numbers would be so different such that we would be able to say this is like whatever. And then furthermore, the vast majority of kids aren't having emergencies such that they need to go to a hospital on a regular basis. So I don't know that it's happening so frequently such that we should be using this as some of our consideration for the overall health of the children, right? Most children aren't going to the hospital.
Yeah, all right. I was just trying to be sure on that.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't use it as a main argument, but I do think there is something to be said about the doctor to patient ratio in more rural areas, and the more even the medical worker to patient ratio is incredibly low in comparison to more populated areas. So it is something to keep in consideration, even if somebody's not going to the emergency room. It affects people getting just yearly appointments, children getting specialists, normal people getting specialists, right? So it is something to consider. Yeah.
Oh, sure. What you're considering are the problems associated with rural living, which is very, very different than suburban living, right? Because I think while
Well, even in
most of us,
suburban areas.
No. See, now, please don't play fast. Please don't play fast and loose with rural versus suburban. They're very, very different.
Yeah, but we're talking about
we're
talking about nationwide like doctor shortages, right? And that applies both to suburban areas and to rural areas. Not all suburban areas are created equal.
And cities and urban areas. So again, so now just talking about an entirely different broad conversation specifically about just, hey, here's a problem with the country. Great, I'm giving you that. That's a problem.
No, I mean like
it is not a problem that is specifically germane to suburbs and rural areas, unless you can find me some data to support that.
Actually, right. So I understand what you're saying, and it seems like I'm going off topic, but I am just bringing it up as something that's relevant because in more populated areas, you do have less of a doctor to patient like a lesser ratio. Basically, it's just something to consider. I'm certainly not saying like bulldoze all the suburbs either, but it's just something to think about, with the more populated a place is.
I can only think about it with data. So if you can find me some data that suggests that, I'm willing to entertain it. But right now, I don't think there's any data that suggests that suburbs.
Sure. I mean, I did a whole project on this for like for like a whole semester. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Can you link it? Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, oh god, this is why I hate this topic. Because the reason why there are issues with hospitals and access to hospitals is because of land use and the requirements that are around land use. So if you create your entire community based on one particular type of districting, and the districting has land use requirements,
sorry guys, it's getting late. I gotta jump off. We will do more tomorrow. Thanks for all the new people that started following. Thanks for the bits, any subs. If I missed them, I'm sorry. I appreciate you guys. Have a good night. Thank you.